Hey, welcome back. Or if this is your very first time here, hey, welcome. I'm really glad you found this place. Come on in, get comfortable, pull that blanket a little closer, find the position that feels just right, and let everything else go for tonight. Whatever the day was, however long, however full, however much it asked of you, it's done now. It's behind you. And right now, in this moment, the only thing you need to do is breathe and listen. That's it, just that. This is Sleepy History with Alan, and tonight we are going somewhere wonderful. Not far, in the sense of distance. No exotic landscape, no dramatic horizon. Just a small, quiet valley in the heart of England, green and grey and smelling of wood smoke and turned, earth, and a cluster of low thatched cottages nestled together, the way people in uncertain times always nestle together, close, warm, known to each other. The year is 1250 or thereabouts, and we are going to spend one full, slow, ordinary day in a medieval village following one ordinary man through the unremarkable, quietly beautiful rhythm of his life. From the very first grey light of dawn, when he lies still on his straw mattress listening to the world wake up around him, all the way to the last ember of the evening fire and the slow, heavy, grateful closing of his eyes. One day, one life, lived completely. You're safe here, friend. Warm and completely comfortable. Nothing from the outside world can reach you now. Just breathe easy, settle in, and let the old world come to you soft and slow, like first light through thatch. Now, before we step into that world together, let me tell you why I love this kind of history, why I keep coming back to it, episode after episode, and why I genuinely think it is the most nourishing kind of history there is. When most of us learned history in school, we learned it from the top down, kings and queens, battles and treaties, the decisions made by powerful people in grand stone rooms that rippled outward and changed the shape of the world. And those stories matter, they do, but they have a way of making history feel like something that happened to other people. Extraordinary people. People with armies and thrones and the particular confidence of those who have never had to wonder whether the harvest will be enough. Tonight, we are doing something different. Tonight, we are going to the bottom, to the ground level, to the place where history is not made in grand gestures but lived in small ones, in the cold feet on an earth floor at dawn, in the weight of a plough handle, in the smell of bread torn at a table, in the sound of children falling asleep by a low fire. We are following a man who left no record of himself. No letters, no portrait, no monument. Just a life, a full, real, deeply human life lived in a small English village in the middle of the 13th century. He was a farmer, a husband, a father, a neighbour, a man who worried about the rent and loved his children and knew the personality of his particular strip of field the way you know a familiar face. He was, in every meaningful sense, just a person. And his day, that one quiet, unremarkable day, was full of things worth knowing, full of sensation and labour and small joy and the particular, irreplaceable beauty of a life lived close to the earth, close to the seasons, close to the people who matter most. What strikes me, every time I return to this world, is not how foreign it is how familiar. The reluctance to leave a warm bed on a cold morning, the satisfaction of a meal after hard work, the way the tiredness at the end of a full day feels different from every other kind of tiredness. Heavier, yes, but also somehow lighter. Earned. Complete. These things have not changed in 800 years. He felt them, and so do you. So let's go to him. Let's walk beside him through his one ordinary, extraordinary day, and let the quietness of his world, the slowness of it, the groundedness of it, carry you gently, gently, toward the rest you came here for. You're warm. You're safe. The night is soft and long and entirely yours. Let's begin. Let me paint you a picture. Close your eyes or let them go soft and unfocused, resting gently on whatever is in front of you, and try to imagine this. A valley, small and green and quietly beautiful, the way the English Midlands are quietly beautiful, not dramatic, not wild, not the kind of landscape that demands your attention, the kind that simply holds you. Low hills on either side, their slopes covered in a mix of woodland and rough pasture, and between them, at the valley's gentle floor, a village. Perhaps 30 households. Perhaps 40. The cottages are low, so low that a tall man standing on his toes could almost touch the roof ridge. They are built from whatever the land offered freely. Timber frames, cut from the oak woodland at the valley's edge, filled in with wattle and daub, woven hazel branches, packed with a mixture of clay and straw and chalk. And, if we are being honest, a little animal dung worked in for binding. The roofs are thick thatch, cut from the reeds of a nearby stream, and layered so densely that rain takes a long time to find its way through. In the morning light, in any light, the thatch has a warmth to it, a golden grey texture, like the coat of a large sleeping animal. Each cottage is small, one room usually, a packed earth floor, a central hearth with no chimney, just a hole in the roof, or a gap under the eaves, where the smoke finds its own slow way out into the sky. A sleeping platform, a table, a bench, a wooden chest for the good things, a few clay pots near the fire, bunches of dried herbs hanging from the low rafters. That is a home. That is everything a home needs to be. Just breathe, friend. You're warm and safe, and the village is just coming into focus around you, slow and soft. Beyond the cottages, the fields, 3 of them, 3 great open sweeps of agricultural land, stretching outward from the village in different directions, each one divided into long, narrow strips like the pages of a very large, unbound book. This is the open field system, the great engine of medieval English agriculture, and it has a beauty to it that is easy to miss if you are only looking for the picturesque. The beauty is in its fairness. Each family's strips are scattered across all 3 fields, some in the better drained upper sections, some in the heavier clay of the lower ground, so that the good soil and the difficult soil are shared more or less evenly between everyone. No single household gets all the best land. No single household bears all the burden of the worst. It is an imperfect system, like all systems made by people, but it is a system built on the understanding that everyone's survival is connected to everyone else's, and that understanding gives it a moral weight that I find, quietly, quite moving. And then, the common land. The woodland at the valley's edge where the pigs are turned out in autumn to fatten on fallen acorns. The meadow along the stream that is cut for hay in summer. The rough pasture on the hillside where the sheep graze. All of it shared. All of it held in common, managed by the collective decisions of the village community, available to every household according to its needs and its rights. This is the world our man lives in. This is the world that made him, and that he in turn helps to make one furrow at a time, one season at a time, one ordinary day at a time. And it is into one of those ordinary days that we are now about to step. The sky above the village is the particular silver grey of an English autumn morning, not yet light, not quite dark, that suspended colour that has no exact name, somewhere between pewter and pearl. The fires in the cottages have burned low through the night. The lane between the houses is empty and still. The church tower at the village's heart is a dark shape against the brightening sky, and in one particular cottage, in the warm dark, a man is lying still, listening. Let's go to him. He is awake before the day is, not sharply awake, not the sudden, startled wakefulness of alarm or worry, just the slow, quiet kind, the kind that arrives like a tide coming in, so gradually that you cannot say exactly when it happened, only that at some point the sleep was there, and now it isn't, and the body is beginning, gently and without urgency, to remember itself. His eyes are closed. He is lying on his side, and the straw mattress beneath him holds the shape of his body, the way a riverbed holds the shape of the water that has always moved through it. Not softly, not by any modern standard, but familiarly, completely. The mattress knows him, his hips, his shoulders, the long line of his spine. He has slept on this same surface for so many years that the fit between them is, in its own particular way, perfect. He is warm. That is the first and most important fact of this moment. He is warm, and he is still, and the darkness around him is the kind of darkness that the modern world has almost entirely forgotten how to make. Total darkness. complete darkness. Not the incomplete dark of a bedroom with a charging light somewhere and a street lamp pressing around the curtain edge. The real thing, full, soft, ancient. The darkness that human beings have been sleeping inside since the very beginning of human beings. It does not frighten him. Why would it? It is simply the dark of a room he knows by heart. Every dimension of it lives in his body. Every sound of it is catalogued somewhere beneath conscious thought. He could cross this room in this darkness without hesitation, without a single stumble. He has done it many times. But right now, he is not crossing it. Right now, he is lying inside it, held by it, resting inside the darkness the way a stone rests at the bottom of a still pond. His wife is beside him. He is aware of her before he is aware of almost anything else. The warmth of her along his back, steady and slow, rising and falling with the deep, unhurried rhythm of her sleep. He knows that breathing, knows it more thoroughly than he knows almost any other thing in the world. 12 years of waking beside it. 12 years of that specific sound being the first sound his sleeping mind reaches for in the grey hour before morning. It has not become ordinary in the way that things become ordinary when you stop noticing them. It has become ordinary in the better way, the way the sunrise is ordinary, not because it is unremarkable, but because it is always there, always itself, always exactly and completely what it is, reliable in the deepest sense of the word. The kind of reliable that stops being something you think about and becomes instead something your whole life is quietly organized around. He lies beside that sound. He does not think, I am grateful. He does not think anything, quite. But the gratitude is there, underneath thought. The way the deep current of a river is there beneath its surface, invisible from above, but moving everything. You're safe, dear friend. Warm and held and completely at rest. Just like him, there is nothing that needs doing right now. Nothing at all. Just breathe. The cottage around him has its own quiet life at this hour. The walls wattle and daub, packed with clay and straw, and the compressed memory of many seasons breathe very slightly as the temperature shifts in the pre-dawn, making a sound so faint it is barely a sound at all. A soft settling. A small creak from somewhere in the timber frame above. The wood contracting in the cold, finding its position for the morning. The thatch rustles almost imperceptibly when the wind moves through it, and there is a wind tonight. A gentle one, an autumn wind from the west that doesn't announce itself but is simply present. Like a quiet thought, he hears all of it. In the dark, in the silence, his hearing opens outward like a hand uncurling. The oxen in the byre next door, their slow, heavy shifting in the straw. The occasional long exhale of a large animal deep in its own sleep. A dog somewhere across the green, making a brief investigative sound at something and then going quiet. And beneath everything, very faint, at the very edge of what can be heard, the stream at the village's edge. Its constant low murmur, only audible in the deepest quiet of the deepest hour. He lies in all of this sound and is part of it. This is what I find most striking. Thinking about him in this moment. He is not alone in this grey hour, even lying still in his dark cottage. He is woven into a fabric of sounds and proximities and mutual knowings. The ox next door, the dog across the green, the neighbour whose rooster is already stirring 2 cottages down. All of them present to each other, even in sleep, even in the dark, even without a word being spoken. This is the texture of village life in the 13th century. Not privacy, not solitude, not the sealed-off quietness of a modern home, but something warmer and more complicated than that. A togetherness that requires no effort because it is simply the condition of existence here. The shared dark, the shared cold, the shared breath of a community that has been living this closely together for longer than anyone can remember. The children are on the sleeping platform. He can hear them. Faintly, the particular quality of children's sleep breathing, lighter and quicker than an adult's, their small bodies burning through the night at a higher rate, dreaming with what seems like greater intensity. His son, 9 years old, who fell asleep last night still holding the piece of wood he has been carving all week, his hands reluctant to put it down, even when the rest of him had already gone. His daughter, 5 or 6, who sleeps with the complete and total commitment of the very young, as though sleep was something to be done as fully and seriously as any other task. He did not hear them wake in the night. Good. That is good. He breathes quietly for a moment and lets the simple, enormous relief of that fact move through him. They slept. They are well. The night passed without requiring anything of him. This is not a small thing. In a world without the medical infrastructure of ours, in a season that is moving toward cold, every morning that the children wake healthy is a morning to be received with something close to gratitude. He receives it now, without naming it. His mind, in this last quiet interval before the day begins, moves slowly and without direction. The thoughts that come are soft ones, not plans, not worries, not the organized, purposeful thinking of a man considering his day. Just impressions, surfaces, fragments. The lower corner of his strip, where the clay is heavy and the plough always wants to drift left. The way his neighbour laughed yesterday, that sudden, unguarded burst of genuine amusement at something, quickly reined in, always slightly surprising. The smell of the pottage last night, rich and thick, when he came through the door and the whole cottage held it like a warm hand. These thoughts do not require anything from him. They arrive and they dissolve, arrive and dissolve, like small waves on a very still shore. He watches them without catching them, the way you watch clouds move when you are lying on your back in the grass. There and then gone. There and then gone. The darkness is beginning very faintly, almost imperceptibly to soften. He can feel it more than see it, a barely there shift in the quality of the air, a suggestion of something at the edge of things, the way a sound suggests itself before it fully arrives. Not light. Not yet. The memory of light, perhaps. The rumour of it. Morning is coming. It is not here yet, but it is coming. The way all things that are coming can be felt before they arrive. Let this quiet hold you, friend. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. Just rest here in the dark, in the warmth, in the soft, slow breathing of this sleeping cottage. Everything is perfectly all right. And then the rooster. One tentative crow, exploratory, uncertain, cut off almost immediately as though the bird itself is not entirely convinced. It lands in the silence of the pre-dawn and disperses slowly, like a stone dropped in still water, the ripples moving outward and then flattening back into calm. He almost smiles. He knows this rooster. 3 years of mornings have made them intimately acquainted. A large, rust-coloured, deeply self-important bird belonging to the family 2 cottages down. A creature of magnificent confidence and zero self-doubt, who approaches every dawn as though the entire enterprise of the sun rising depends personally on him. In a few minutes he will try again. The second time. He will mean it. Our villager lies still and waits, in the full and perfect knowledge of what is coming. The way you can wait for something familiar with complete equanimity, because familiar things, even the things that wake you, carry their own comfort inside them. The comfort of the known. The comfort of the world behaving exactly as the world always behaves. The rooster doing what the rooster does. The morning arriving the way mornings arrive. Everything in its right place. The second crow comes. Loud. Clear. Absolute. The voice of a bird with a mission. And at the far edge of the door frame, that gap where the heavy oak door doesn't quite meet the timber, where the outside world presses its face against the inside world every morning, a thin, barely, their line of grey. The first light. Not light, really. The suggestion of light. The absence of the very deepest dark. The first breath of a dawn that is still assembling itself, somewhere below the horizon. He watches it for one more moment. That thin line of grey. That quiet announcement. Then he takes one last long breath, slow, full, complete. A breath that gathers up everything the night has given him, and holds it for just one more second, and he lets it go. He swings his legs over the edge of the mattress. His feet touch the cold, packed earth of the floor, and the day begins. Cold earth under bare feet. That is the first sensation of the day. Not a thought, not a plan, just the immediate physical fact of cold, packed earth beneath his soles. arriving before his mind has fully caught up with his body. It is a small shock that is not quite a shock, because it happens every morning, and the body remembers it even when the sleeping mind has forgotten. His toes curl slightly against the ground. He pulls in a quiet breath through his nose. Then he breathes out and stands. He is still for a moment, just standing in the dark beside the mattress. Not thinking. Not yet. Just letting the standing happen, letting the body remember its vertical self, letting the sleep finish, leaving him the way sleep finishes, leaving a room when you open the window. Gradually. Completely. Until the air is just air again and the room is just a room and he is just a man standing on a cold floor in the dark before dawn. This is something we have largely lost, I think. This moment of simply standing, of not reaching immediately for the next thing, not a device, not a plan, not the first item on a list that began assembling itself before the eyes were even open, just standing briefly in the space between sleep and day, letting the self arrive in its own time. He does it without knowing it is anything worth noting. Then he moves toward the fire. The hearth is at the center of the floor, a shallow depression lined with flat stones, dark and smooth from years of accumulated heat. Around its edges, the ash from last night's fire has settled into a fine pale ring, and at the center of that ring, if you look closely and he looks closely, lowering himself to one knee, bringing his face near, there is still life. A handful of embers buried under grey ash. Still glowing, still holding. He can feel the warmth on his face before he can properly see the glow, a faint, dry heat, reaching up toward him like a small, impatient greeting. He has seen this every morning for years, and it still gives him something, this moment. The embers surviving the night, the fire not quite gone, the warmth preserved in the grey ash like a secret kept faithfully until morning. He reaches for the tinder box beside the hearth. Inside, a nest of dried grass and thin shavings of wood, prepared last night, waiting exactly here for exactly this moment. His hands move without instruction. He has done this so many times that the sequence lives not in his mind, but in his fingers, the small nest of dry grass, cupped in his palm, held close to the buried glow. He leans in, blows long, slow, patient, a breath that is the opposite of urgent, that understands the difference between coaxing and forcing. The embers brighten. He blows again, softer this time. A thread of smoke rises. And then that small, specific, irreplaceable moment of flame. Tentative at first, feeling its way along the edge of a single dry grass stem with the careful curiosity of something new to the world. Then finding its confidence, spreading to the next stem, climbing, the soft, barely audible crackle of it filling the quiet cottage like a tiny cheerful voice saying, "Here. I'm here. It's all right." He sits back on his heels and watches it, just for a moment, just long enough to be sure of it. This moves me, every time I return to this image. The rebuilding of the fire. It is such a small act, such an unremarkable act, performed in almost every human household that has ever existed, in almost every cold morning that history contains. And yet it is, in the most literal possible sense, the act that makes everything else possible. Without this fire there is no warmth, no cooked food, no light to work by in the short days of autumn and winter. It is the first act of the day, because it is the most necessary act, the one that all the others depend on, and he performs it with his bare hands, from almost nothing, in the dark before dawn, the same way his father performed it, and his father's father, going back further than memory has names for. You're warm and safe, dear friend, just like the fire, just rebuilt, just finding itself again in the dark. There's nothing needed of you right now. Just breathe and let the warmth come. He feeds the fire carefully. Small sticks first, finger-thin, dry, laid crosswise over the young flame so that the air can move between them freely. He knows how this fire likes to breathe. He knows it the way he knows the oxen, the way he knows the field, not from study but from sustained, daily, years-long attention. You do not learn a fire from a book. You learn it from 1,000 mornings of watching what it does when you do this, and what it does when you do that, until the knowledge stops being knowledge and becomes something more immediate than knowledge. Instinct, maybe, or the thing that instinct becomes when you practice it long enough. He adds slightly larger pieces, then larger still. The fire accepts each one, draws it in, incorporates it, grows. Within a few minutes it is burning steadily, a real fire now. Not the tentative thing of a moment ago, but something settled and purposeful, with a low, consistent voice and a warmth that is already beginning to move outward into the cold air of the cottage. Not a flood of warmth, not all at once, just the beginning of warmth, the leading edge of it, reaching toward him as he kneels at the hearth with his hands extended, palms open, feeling the heat work its way into the stiff joints of his fingers. He stays there for a moment, hands open toward the flame. His right wrist aches, a familiar ache, present every morning, the accumulated gift of years of plough work, the particular wear that a plough handle places on a wrist over a lifetime of seasons. He does not fight it. He simply lets the fire's warmth find it, the way you let warmth find any sore place, patiently, without forcing, trusting the heat to do its slow and honest work. His fingers loosen. He breathes. Behind him, his wife is waking. He can hear it, the specific sound of the straw mattress as she shifts and sits up, a sound he could identify in complete darkness from across the room. She makes a small, quiet sound, not quite a word, not quite a sigh, just an acknowledgement of wakefulness, directed at no one in particular. He does not turn. She does not speak to him yet. This is not coldness between them. It is the opposite of coldness. It is the ease of two people who have shared enough mornings that words are not always the first requirement, who know the shape of each other's silence, who can occupy the same small space in the dark, each doing their part of the morning without needing to announce themselves. He hears her feet on the floor, the soft fall of them, lighter than his, the rustle of her wool dress as she pulls it over her head, then movement toward the shelf near the door, and a sound that he knows before he consciously registers it, the particular dense weight of a loaf being moved, set down, prepared for. The bread. He turns his head slightly, not enough to look, just enough to let the information arrive through his nose. Yesterday's loaf maslin bread, rye and wheat mixed, dark and slightly sour, dense enough to hold a working man upright until midday. She tears a piece from it, and the sound of that small, soft, specific sound of bread being torn, reaches him like something from very far away and also from very close. It is one of those sounds that crosses 800 years without losing a single quality. Bread being torn by a woman in a cold kitchen before dawn. For her family, there is no year in which that sound does not mean exactly what it means. There is no era in which it is not the sound of provision and care, and the ordinary daily practice of love that does not call itself love because it does not need to. What strikes me most, thinking about this small moment, is how completely the practical and the loving are the same thing here. She is feeding her family. She is also, in the exact same gesture, loving them, not as two separate acts, as one single act that contains both, the way water contains both hydrogen and oxygen without being either one alone. The children are waking now. He can hear his son on the sleeping platform, a restless shuffling, the particular sound of a child caught between sleep and wakefulness, neither one thing nor the other. A murmur, a complaint about the cold that is not quite directed at anyone, then quiet again, and then not quite the sound of sitting up, of the straw shifting under a lighter weight. His daughter is slower. She always is. She surfaces from sleep reluctantly, like someone who knows a good thing when she has it, and is in no particular hurry to leave it behind. He can hear her now, a small, soft, wordless sound from the platform, the sound of a child rearranging herself around the fact of mourning without fully committing to it yet. He smiles, facing the fire, to himself, to the fire almost. There is no one to see it, and it does not need to be seen. It is just the smile that happens when the sounds of your household reach you in the early morning, and all the sounds are right. The ordinary sounds, the familiar sounds, the sounds that tell you everything is where it should be, and everyone is well, and the day can begin from a foundation of that knowledge. His wife is speaking now, low and warm, to the children, the particular music of a mother's morning voice, patient, unhurried, a voice that carries in it the implicit message that the world is manageable, that the cold is temporary, that the day will hold good things if you are willing to get up and meet it. The cottage is coming alive. He rises from the hearth, crosses to the peg near the door where his outdoor things hang, his heavier tunic, his linen coif, his worn leather belt. He dresses in the way that a man dresses when he has been dressing himself in the same few garments for years, quickly, without mirror, without consideration, the hands moving purely from memory, the heavier tunic over the lighter one, the belt buckled, the coif pulled over his head, settling around his face the way a familiar thing settles without resistance, exactly as expected. He is himself. This is another thing I find quietly important about his world. He does not dress for other people in the morning. He does not choose between options or consider appearances. He puts on the clothes that are his clothes, the clothes that do the work his life requires, and in doing so he becomes, without effort or deliberation, exactly who he is. There is a simplicity in that which I think we underestimate. The simplicity of a self that is not constructed fresh each morning, but is simply resumed, picked up from where it was set down the night before, worn like the familiar weight of a tool that fits the hand. He crosses to the door. The iron hinges squeak that specific familiar squeak, the sound the house makes on his behalf every time he leaves and every time he returns, a small announcement that has long since ceased to register as a sound, and become instead simply part of the sensation of crossing this particular threshold. He puts his hand on the door, pushes. The cold air takes him immediately. Not brutally, the deep cold is still weeks away, and this is an autumn morning, not a winter one, but with that sharp, clean, particular quality of early autumn air in England, damp and sweet, and carrying in it the smell of turned earth from the fields, and wood smoke from the fires that are beginning to rise now from other rooftops around the lane. He stops in the doorway, his hand still on the door, and breathes it in. The sky above the village is pale, silver grey, that nameless colour between pewter and pearl. The low shapes of the other cottages are just visible in the pre-dawn light, dark and still, with thin threads of smoke beginning to rise from 2 or 3 of them neighbours already awake, already building their own fires, already beginning their own mornings. Here and there the faint warm glow of firelight around a door's edge, pressing out into the grey morning like a small beacon. The village is waking. He is part of that waking, one thread in the slow, communal weave of it, one fire added to the others, one pair of feet on the lane, one set of shoulders settling into the morning. He is not alone in this grey hour. He has never been alone in it, not once in his entire life. Behind him, through the open door, the warmth of the fire he just built, the smell of bread, the sound of his wife's voice, the small, sleepy sounds of his children coming into the day, home behind him, the field ahead of him. He takes one more breath of the cold, sweet morning air and turns toward the byre. The byre door is lower than the cottage door. He ducks through it without thinking. The body's quiet knowledge of a threshold it has crossed 10,000 times, the head dropping at exactly the right moment, the shoulders angling through the frame without conscious instruction. The hinges here are wooden, not iron, and they make a different sound than the cottage door. Deeper, slower, a soft, resonant groan, like something large and patient clearing its throat. He steps inside, and the warmth hits him. This is always a small surprise, even after years of it, the warmth of the byre on a cold morning. 2 large animals have been breathing and sleeping in this enclosed space all night, and the heat they generate is remarkable, trapped beneath the low ceiling and held by the packed straw on the floor and the thick walls on all sides. He steps in from the cold of the lane, and the warmth closes around him like a second garment, immediate and generous, and he stands for just a moment inside it, letting it settle over him. The smell is strong, rich and deep and animal, the smell of oxen and straw and damp earth and the particular sweetness of large warm bodies in an enclosed space. It is not, to him, an unpleasant smell. It has never been unpleasant to him. It is simply the smell of the byre, which is the smell of the animals he depends on, which is the smell of the source of almost everything his family has. You do not find unpleasant the smell of the thing your life rests on. You find it, over years of intimate acquaintance, something closer to comfort. His eyes adjust. The interior of the byre assembles itself around him in shades of brown and grey, the low ceiling, the straw floor, the two animals in their stalls, their great dark shapes solid and still in the dim light. There are two of them, both males, both castrated gelded early, as working oxen always are, so that their considerable energy goes into labour rather than anything else. Both the large, broad, brown and white kind that does the heavy agricultural work of this part of England, built for the slow and powerful task of pulling a plough through heavy clay soil. They are not his alone, he shares them with his neighbour, the man 3 cottages down whose strips lie alongside his in the open field, and with whom he has worked side by side for nearly a decade. Between the two households, they make up half a plough team. On ploughing days, the neighbour's animals join his, and the full team of 4 moves together through the field with the slow, irresistible power of something that cannot be hurried and does not need to be. But this morning, in this byre, they are simply his. He moves to the nearer one, the older of the two, a great broad-shouldered animal whose hide is warm and slightly damp with the heat of the night. He puts his hand flat against the animal's neck. The ox is deeply, solidly warm beneath his palm. The short hair of his coat is soft in a way that always registers slightly as a surprise. You expect roughness from an animal this large, this powerful, and instead you find this, a softness. The large muscles beneath shifting slowly as the ox turns his heavy head to regard the man with one enormous dark eye. That eye, round and full and fathomlessly patient. It looks at him with an expression that is not quite intelligence and not quite nothing, something older than either, something that has been looking out from the eyes of working animals at the faces of the people who tend them since before history had a name for the relationship. He looks back. He speaks a few low words, barely words at all, more the shape of words than their content, a low, warm murmur from the back of the throat that means, in whatever language exists between a man and the animals he has worked with for years, I'm here. Good morning. We're all right. The ox blinks. Slowly. Completely. Then the younger one shifts in his stall, his hooves finding new positions in the straw, his breath making a small cloud in the air. And the morning has properly and fully begun. You're warm and perfectly safe, dear friend. Nothing is needed of you right now. Just breathe and let this quiet morning unfold around you, soft and slow. He moves through the byre with the efficiency of deep habit, checks the water, the wooden trough along the near wall, still adequate from last night's filling, forks a measure of hay from the store at the back dry, sweet-smelling hay, cut from the village meadow in summer, and stored here for exactly these mornings. He runs his hands along each animal's flank as he passes, feeling for anything that shouldn't be there. A heat, a swelling, a flinch at the touch. There is nothing. They are well and sound and strong, and the quiet satisfaction of this confirmed fact moves through him the way all small but important confirmations move through a person who has learned not to take good things for granted. Everything is as it should be. He lifts the yoke from its peg on the wall. It is a heavy thing, a thick, curved beam of oak, smoothed by decades of handling to a deep, warm brown, the iron fittings worn to a shine by years of use. His father's yoke before it was his, possibly his grandfather's before that. He carries it across his forearms with the easy familiarity of something that has been carried this way so many times that the weight has been fully absorbed into the body's understanding of itself, not heavy anymore, just the particular gravity of a familiar object. He begins the yoking. The process is slow and requires patience, always patience, with large animals, at any hour, and especially in the early morning when they are stiff from the night and not yet warmed into their working selves. He speaks to them continuously as he works, that low, unbroken murmur, a kind of vocal constant that keeps them oriented toward him, that tells them at every moment where he is and what he is doing, and that everything is proceeding exactly as it always proceeds. First the older one, the yoke settled across his broad neck, the wooden bow curved beneath, the pins secured, a pat on the flank firm, affectionate, the pat of long familiarity. Then, the younger one, who requires a slightly firmer touch in the mornings, not because he is difficult, but because he is younger and livelier, and mornings take him longer to arrive in. He accepts the yoke with a small sideways shift of his head, a momentary opinion quickly reconsidered. The pin is secured. They are joined now, the two of them a single working unit, patient and enormous, yoked together by the oak beam that has yoked every morning of their working lives. He takes the lead rope. They move, out through the low door, and the animals navigate it without instruction, their great heads dropping at exactly the right moment, stepping through the frame with the practiced ease of creatures that have performed this particular movement every morning for years. Out into the cold lane, the cold air greeting all three of them at once. The man, the two animals with the same cool indifference. It extends to everything. The oxen snort, twin jets of steam from their wide nostrils, rising immediately into the cold air and dispersing. Two small clouds dissolving back into the grey morning. Their breath makes clouds. His breath makes clouds. They walk together, he leading, the animals following, their great hooves making that slow, deep, resonant sound on the packed earth of the lane, a sound that carries in the still morning air and announces them to the waking village before they are seen. The village is moving now, other shapes in the half-light men emerging from doorways and byres, some leading animals, some carrying tools over their shoulders, some simply walking with their hands tucked against their sides against the cold. Brief words exchanged as paths converge. A nod, a short observation about the sky, the frost, the state of the ground after yesterday's rain. These are not idle exchanges. They are assessments. Two farmers reading the morning's evidence and comparing notes, because the morning's evidence is information that affects decisions, and decisions in this world have real consequences. His neighbour falls into step beside him. They have co-owned these animals and co-worked these fields for nearly a decade, and they fall into step together, the way people fall into step when they have done the same work at the same hour enough times that their bodies simply know the rhythm of it. The four animals move together now, their breath rising in synchronized clouds, their hooves making a doubled percussion on the lane. What strikes me about this image, these two men, these four animals moving through the grey morning toward the fields, is its complete and utter ordinariness. There is nothing heroic in it, nothing that a chronicler of the age would pause to record, and yet this is one of the most important processions in the history of the world. These men, these fields, this labour. Without it, there is no bread. Without bread, there are no cities, no cathedrals, no universities, no manuscripts, no courts, no kings. Every structure of medieval civilization, every stone tower, an illuminated page and philosophical argument rests, at its foundation, on these two men walking through the grey morning with their oxen, on the 10,000 men like them, across England and Europe, performing this same unremarkable procession in this same grey hour. I think about this often. The invisible foundation, the labour that makes everything else possible, that is never seen precisely because it is always there. The village opens into the field. It happens gradually, the cottages thinning out, the lane becoming a track, the track becoming a path, and then the path simply dissolving at the edge of the open land, the way a river dissolves at the edge of the sea. One moment there are walls and fences and the contained world of the village. The next moment there is space, enormous, open, unhurried space. He stops for just a moment at the field's edge. The open field in the early morning is a particular kind of beautiful. The long strips run away from him in their parallel ridges and furrows, the ridge and furrow of repeated ploughing, the land itself shaped by generations of labour into a slow, rolling texture. The stubble of the recent harvest is still visible between the strips, pale and wet with dew, catching the flat early light in thin silver threads. At the far end of the field, perhaps half a mile distant, the tree line is a dark and steady blur against the brightening sky, and the sky above it all is enormous. This is what the open field does that hedged and fenced landscapes do. Not it gives you the sky in its full and uninterrupted extent. The sky presses down on the open field with a gentle, total presence, and a man standing at its edge is a small figure beneath a very large thing, and he knows it, and it does not diminish him. It simply clarifies proportion, the proportion of a man and his labour, and the sky that holds them both. He moves to his strip, his particular piece of this land, one of the dozen or so strips he holds across the 3 fields, this one running from north to south, 40 yards long, the width of a plough cut multiplied over many seasons into its current ridge and furrow form. He knows it with a specificity that goes beyond the visual. He knows the feel of it underfoot, the way the ground changes texture as you move from the headland onto the strip itself, the subtle shift in drainage you can feel through the soles of your feet after rain. He knows the heavy clay in the lower corner that holds water too long. He knows the one persistent stone near the middle that works its way back to the surface every few years, no matter how many times he removes it. He knows this land, and the land, in whatever way a piece of earth can know a thing, knows him back. His neighbour is already moving the plough into position. Their shared plough, a heavy wooden thing, its beam worn smooth, its iron ploughshare dark and sharp, is manhandled from the field's edge where it was left yesterday, dragged into position at the top of the strip, the beam connected to the yoke with practiced, efficient movements. Neither man says much. The work of connecting a plough team is not work that benefits from conversation. It requires both hands and most of the attention, and they have done it together often enough that the coordination happens through small gestures and the occasional brief word rather than any extended discussion. When it is done, they test the fittings, check the share angle. He takes his position behind the plough, his hands close around the handles worn smooth and curved very slightly to the shape of a grip, warm now with the warmth already coming through his palms. He leans his weight slightly forward, feeling the whole system balance itself around him. His hands on the handles, his weight through the beam, the animals ahead connected through the chain and the yoke, the iron tip of the share resting against the surface of the soil, everything held in a single line of intention. He looks down the length of his strip, 40 yards of pale, untouched stubble waiting. He speaks one low word to the oxen. They lean into the yoke, the chain goes taut, and the ploughshare bites into the earth a clean, decisive sound. The sharp iron parting the soil with a resistance that he feels all the way up through the handles and into his shoulders, and the first long furrow of the day begins to open, dark and rich and slightly steaming in the cold air, the turned earth curling away from the share in a slow, continuous wave. The morning is fully underway. The first furrow sets everything, not just the line, though it sets the line too, and the line matters, because every subsequent furrow will follow it, running parallel, building the ridge and furrow pattern that defines this strip through every season. No, the first furrow sets something else as well, something less visible and more important. It sets him. It pulls him out of the half-world of the early morning, the cold lane, the buyer, the brief exchange with his neighbour, and drops him completely into the work, into this specific field, this specific morning, this specific and immediate reality. By the time the first furrow is complete 40 yards, from headland to headland, he is no longer a man thinking about the day ahead. He is simply a man ploughing. And that, he has learned over 15 years of mornings like this one, is a very particular kind of freedom. Let me try to walk you through it. The actual physical experience of ploughing, because it is so far removed from anything most of us have ever done, that it requires a certain slow and patient attention to enter properly. The first thing to understand is that ploughing is, above all else, walking. This surprises people. You might imagine the farmer standing still, or riding, or doing something primarily with his hands. But ploughing is walking. His feet are moving continuously, from the moment the share bites into the earth at the top of the strip to the moment it lifts at the bottom. And then he turns the team and walks back, and turns again, and walks back, and this continues all morning and into the afternoon, back and forth across the 40 yards of his strip, until the light goes or the body says enough. Before this day is over, he will have walked somewhere between 8 and 10 miles. And here is the thing that I find most moving about this fact: the medieval acre, the unit of land that a man with a plough team could turn in a single day, was defined not by geometry but by exactly this. By the distance a man could walk, By the measure of human effort and human endurance, an acre was a unit of the body, a unit of one person's walking over one day through one piece of earth. History is measured in acres. Acres are measured in footsteps. He walks. His feet find their footing in the soft ground between the forming ridges, the earth giving slightly under each step, not mud, not quite, but yielding and alive in the way that good ploughing soil yields when the moisture is right. The sound beneath his feet is a soft compression with each step, a quiet giving way, and his ears receive this information without being asked to the sound of the soil, telling him things about its composition and its moisture, things he could not have articulated if you asked him to, but which his body knows completely. Ahead of him the oxen move, slow, steady, inevitable. Their great haunches shift and roll with each step in that massive, mechanical beauty that large working animals have power so enormous it has become patient, strength so complete it no longer needs to announce itself. The chain between the yoke and the plough beam is taut, a straight line of tension that he can feel through the handles, a continuous low vibration like a note held on a single string. He holds the handles. This is where everything meets his hands, around the worn wood of the handles, the force of the animals pulling forward, the resistance of the earth pushing back, the skill of the ploughman in the middle, adjusting. It is not passive holding, it is constant, active, endlessly micro-correcting holding. The plough wants to drift. The soil pulls it sideways depending on its composition. A buried stone pushes the share left. A change in the ground slope alters the depth of the cut, and he responds to all of it all the time, without pause, with tiny shifts of weight and pressure, the way a sailor in a light wind responds to the boat's movement. Not fighting, conversing. This is skill. The real kind, the kind that lives entirely in the body, that cannot be explained or written down, that can only be built through years of doing. Nothing needs doing right now, friend. Nothing needs deciding. Just breathe and rest, and let the furrow open ahead of you, long and dark and steady. By the third or fourth pass, something shifts. There is no exact moment to point to. It happens the way dawn happens, gradually and then suddenly. The change impossible to locate precisely but completely undeniable once it has arrived. The surface thinking quiets. Not all thought, not emptiness, not blankness, but the particular kind of thinking that narrates and worries and plans and revisits. The restless commentary that the mind runs on itself almost constantly in the background of a waking life that quiets. And in its place, something opens. A wide, attentive stillness. He is more aware of everything, not less the pull of the handles, the sound of the share cutting earth, the cold air on his face, the smell of the turned soil rising around him, the rhythm of the oxen's footfalls, the quality of the light, all of it present, all of it simply, cleanly there, without the layer of interpretation that usually sits between a person and their experience. Just the world being the world, just him, moving through it. Modern psychology has a name for this. We call it flow, that state of complete absorption in a task that matches your skill exactly, where effort and ease become indistinguishable, where the boundary between the self and the work dissolves. Medieval theology might have called it something different, a kind of wordless prayer perhaps. The labouring body as its own form of devotion. He would call it nothing. It is simply what happens when you walk behind a plough long enough. It is the gift hidden inside the labour, waiting at the end of the first few furrows, available to anyone willing to walk far enough to find it. The smell of the turned soil is something I want to stay with for a moment. It is one of those sensory details that anchors you in a place and a time more completely than almost anything else. Fresh turned earth has a smell that is at once ancient and immediate, deep, dark, mineral sweet, caused by a compound called geosmin, released by soil bacteria when the earth is broken open. It is one of the most universally recognized smells in all of human experience. Every person who has ever worked a garden, or walked behind a plough, or simply knelt down and pressed their hands into freshly turned ground, has encountered it. You know this smell. He knows it too, has known it since childhood, since the first time his own father let him hold the plough handle for a moment, and he felt the vibration of the earth moving through the wood and into his small hands. The smell rose around him then, just as it rises around him now, and it meant the same thing then as it means now. It meant this. This is the source. This is the ground of everything. It rises continuously from the furrow as the share cuts through, a steady exhalation from the earth itself, and it fills his lungs with something that is not quite a smell anymore. It is too familiar for that, too deeply woven into who he is. It is simply the smell of his life, the smell of the ground he depends on, opened up and breathing. The turned soil itself is remarkable in colour, not the pale, exhausted surface colour of the stubble and dead grass, but the deep, almost black brown of earth from below, rich with moisture, dense with the compressed biology of seasons. Each furrow reveals it, this hidden colour, and it curls away from the share in a continuous dark ribbon, settling into its new position with a soft, satisfied sound. He watches it, between one step and the next, between one breath and the next. He watches the dark earth curl and settle, over and over, and the satisfaction of it is both practical and something more than practical. The dark colour means good soil, good drainage, good biology. It means the earth is alive and ready. But it is also simply beautiful, the dark against the pale, the opened against the closed, the revealed against the hidden. What strikes me most, watching him through these long morning furrows, is how completely he reads this land. Not with instruments or analysis, with eyes and hands and nose and the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime spent in close, daily, uninterrupted contact with this specific piece of ground. He is, in the deepest and truest sense of the word, literate, just not in letters. His literacy is the earth itself. The sun has arrived, not dramatically, not the golden, triumphant rising of a clear summer morning. It appeared rather than rose, a gradual brightening in the eastern sky that eventually resolved into a pale disk behind thin autumn cloud, casting a flat, generous, shadowless light over everything. The cold has not lifted. His breath still makes small clouds in the air before his face, and the dew on the headland grass still catches the light in cold sparks. But the world is fully visible now, and that matters. The grey pre-dawn is behind him, and the day is properly open. He reaches the far headland and turns the team. The process of turning 4 oxen and a heavy plough at the end of a strip is one of the more demanding moments of the ploughing day. The animals need space to swing wide. The plough needs to be lifted and repositioned, and the whole assembly needs to come back aligned with the previous furrow, close enough to run parallel without overlapping. He does it in a series of practiced movements, speaking low to the animals throughout, his hands on the yoke, guiding them through the turn with the same patient authority he always uses. The team comes back around. He pauses for just a moment at the headland, one full breath, and looks out across the field. It is alive with people, not crowded, not loud, but populated, in the quiet, purposeful way of a working morning, with the figures of a dozen other men and women spread across the 3 fields, some with plough teams of their own, the small shapes of them moving slowly back and forth across their strips, some with spades and mattocks, working the slower, more intimate labour of breaking clods, some doing the walking work of the harrow, back and forth breaking the surface, all of them moving, all of them present to their own particular piece of this shared work. And yet the field is quiet, remarkably, peacefully quiet. The sound does not carry far in the still damp air. A voice from 2 strips over reaches him as a murmur, unresolvable into words. The distant creak of another plough, the occasional low sound of an animal, all of it woven into a kind of ambient texture, the sound of a community working together, which is its own particular kind of silence. He turns his eyes back to his strip, takes up the handles again, speaks one low word to the oxen. They lean forward. By mid-morning, the rhythm has become everything. Walk, turn, walk, turn. The body finds it, and then the body follows it. And after a while, the rhythm is not something he is doing so much as something he is inside of, held by it, carried by it, the way a swimmer is carried by a current, still moving, still working, still entirely present, but held by something larger than his individual effort, something that the labour itself generates. Over time, when you stop fighting it and simply allow it, the cold on his face has become familiar. Not pleasant, not unpleasant, just there, a condition of the morning, as unremarkable now as the sky above him. The ache in his shoulders has settled from a sharp complaint into the dull, background hum of muscles doing what muscles were built to do, present, honest, but no longer demanding. His feet know the ground, his hands know the handles, the oxen know his voice, his weight, the almost imperceptible signals he gives them at each end, and they respond without resistance. The field smells of itself. The sky is pale and enormous and faintly beautiful above him, and somewhere at the back of his awareness, not quite a thought, more a warmth running beneath the labour, is the knowledge of midday, the meal that will come, the rest, the brief, sweet interval in the long morning where his body will be allowed to stop. He does not reach for it impatiently. He does not count furrows toward it. It simply exists, there at the back of everything, a gentle promise that the morning is making to the afternoon, a warmth that the work keeps alive without his needing to tend it. He ploughs, he breathes, he walks, he hears her before he sees her, a voice carrying across the open field from the direction of the village, not loud, not urgent, just projected. The particular carrying quality that people develop when they have spent years communicating across open distances, a voice that knows how to travel without strain, that finds its way through cold air and open space with the easy confidence of something that has done this many times before. He knows that voice from 3 fields away. He lifts his head. She is coming along the headland, that unploughed strip at the top of the field that serves as both turning lane and thoroughfare, and she is carrying things. He can see that from here, even at this distance, from the way she moves, the particular adjustment a person makes when their hands are full, the slight forward lean, the careful balance, a basket over one arm, something in the other hand, her figure moving steadily through the pale midday light with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has timed this walk exactly right, who knows from long practice precisely when he will be ready. He finishes the furrow he is on. This is simply how it is done. You do not stop mid-strip. You do not leave the line broken in the middle of the field. You finish the furrow, and then you stop. This is not rigidity. It is respect. For the work. For the land. For the order of things that makes the day coherent and the field readable and the seasons manageable. He finishes the furrow. He brings the oxen to a halt at the headland, sets the plough, and then slowly, deliberately, with the full weight of the morning behind it, he straightens up. The straightening is its own event. He has been bent forward for the better part of 4 hours, his spine in the particular forward lean of the ploughman, his weight distributed through his hands and his core and the backs of his legs. And now he uncurls vertebra by vertebra, the spine reasserting its full height, the shoulders rolling back and down, the chest opening to the cold air. The sensation of it moves through him like a wave, something releasing that has been held, something opening that has been closed. He exhales a long breath into the cold air. It rises in a cloud and disperses, and with it, it seems, some of the accumulated weight of the morning goes too. Not all of it, not the deep tiredness that will stay until the evening, but the surface layer of it, the tension that builds in the upper body over hours of sustained effort, and which releases, partially, simply in the act of standing upright. He rolls his neck, looks up at the sky. The pale autumn sun is as high as it is going to get today, which is not very high at this latitude. In this season, it sits behind its thin veil of cloud at an angle that tells him midday. The morning is behind him. The afternoon is ahead. And right now, in between, the meal. His wife reaches him. She sets the basket down on the headland grass and straightens, her own back registering the relief of a weight set down. They look at each other, a brief mutual look, the kind that contains a great deal without performing it. A checking in, a quick reading of how the other is, conducted in a glance and answered in a glance. The shorthand of people who have been reading each other for a long time. She asks about the soil. He tells her a gesture toward the lower corner, a few words about the clay. She nods. She has her own understanding of the field, accumulated through years of walking across it, bringing meals, helping at harvest. Her knowledge is different from his and not less than his. Then she is opening the basket, and the meal is beginning. You're safe and warm, friend, at rest, just like him, in the middle of a long day. Let the morning go. Let the pale midday light settle over you like a hand laid gently across your shoulders. The bread first. She has brought a portion of yesterday's loaf maslin bread, rye and wheat mixed. A day old now, and slightly harder than it was yesterday morning. The crust firmer, the interior denser, but no less satisfying for that. He takes his piece and holds it in his hand for just a moment before eating. He is not performing gratitude. He is simply, in the most immediate and unsentimental way, aware of it. The weight of the bread in his hand. The fact of it. After 4 hours of cold work, the fact of bread in the hand is not a small fact. He eats. There is nothing quite like hunger clean, honest, working hunger for returning you to the pure and simple truth of eating. Every bite arrives with an intensity that a full person cannot access. The sour grain taste of the maslin, the slight resistance of the day-old crust giving under his teeth, the way the flavours release into his mouth in sequence, the tartness first, then the deeper grain sweetness beneath. He chews slowly. He tastes everything. His attention, which has been distributed across the field and the animals and the handles for the whole morning, narrows down to this single sufficient point. The bread, the taste, the warmth it generates as it moves through him. This is presence. This is, in fact, one of the purest forms of it available to a human body. Alongside the bread, a piece of cheese, hard and pale and slightly salty, made from a neighbour's cow's milk, traded for some small service or measure of grain, dense and dry, with a flavour that he has eaten enough times to know completely a flavour that tastes somehow of this specific place, this specific season, as though the grass, the cow ate, and the air the milk was made in have left their signatures in the final product. He eats it with the bread, alternating, and the salt of the cheese and the sour of the bread work together in the way that simple foods work together when they belong to the same landscape. Then the ale. She pours it from the earthenware jug, a small, cloudy, low-alcohol brew made from malted grain, thick and slightly sweet and surprisingly nourishing, into a shallow wooden cup, and holds it out to him, and he takes it with both hands. Medieval ale is not what we think of when we think of beer. It is thicker, cloudier, lower in alcohol, brewed not primarily for intoxication, but because the fermentation makes grain water safe to drink and produces something that provides actual sustenance to working people who need all the sustenance they can find. It tastes of grain and yeast and something faintly sweet, like liquid bread, and it moves through him with an immediacy that cold water on its own cannot quite match. He drinks. The coolness of it reaches his chest and spreads outward, and something in his body responds to it with a gratitude that is almost muscular, the deep tissues of him releasing slightly, the sustained effort of the morning finding a small place to rest. What stays with me about this meal is its sufficiency, not its abundance. There is no abundance here, no excess, no second helpings waiting, just bread and cheese and ale, in the quantities that are available, eaten in the cold on the headland of a ploughed field. And yet it is, in the most complete and satisfying sense, enough, exactly enough. The meal that meets the need and stops precisely there, received with the full attention of a hungry body, which is the only kind of attention that truly honours food. We have made eating so complicated in our time. We have surrounded it with so much choice and anxiety and information and performance, and in doing so, we have made it harder to feel this. The clean, pure, complete satisfaction of exactly enough. I think about this often. I think it is one of the more significant things we have lost. His neighbour has settled nearby. The two men eat in companionable proximity, not talking constantly, because there is too much eating to be done for that, and they have been together since before dawn and have said most of what needed saying already. but not silent either. Conversation moves between them in the easy, intermittent way of people whose company is so familiar that it requires no maintenance. A comment about the soil in the lower corner, the neighbour has noticed the same heaviness, the same tendency for the plough to drift. They discuss it briefly, practically, two men comparing notes on a shared problem. An observation about the sky-thin cloud building from the west, which might mean rain by evening. If it comes before they are done, they will need to stop. Rain after ploughing is not necessarily bad. It settles the turned earth, works the moisture down into it. But rain during ploughing makes the soil stick to the share and turns the headlands into mud. They read the sky together. Two men standing at the edge of a medieval field in the pale autumn light, reading the sky. This is one of the oldest human activities there is, the reading of weather, the attempt to know what the atmosphere is preparing to do so that you can prepare your own response. Before instruments, before forecasts, before satellites and radar, just a man and the sky, and the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime spent underneath it. And then his neighbour says something, a short observation about the reeve's recent assessment of the strips, dry and slightly pointed, the kind of comment that contains a whole history of local politics in a single sentence, and our villager laughs. A real laugh. Brief, surprised by itself, quickly settled, but real. And the neighbour grins, satisfied. The way people are satisfied when they have made someone genuinely laugh rather than merely smile politely. I find this moment, this small, completely ordinary exchange of humour between two men eating their midday meal in a cold field in the middle of the 13th century, unexpectedly moving. Not because it is remarkable, because it is exactly not remarkable, because it is simply two people being easy together, finding a moment of lightness in the middle of a long working day, the way people have always found it and always will. Some things do not change. He lies down. After the meal, after the ale, he does what his body has been moving toward for the last half hour. Without his quite knowing it, he lies down on the headland grass, on his back, his legs stretched out, his arms loose at his sides. Just lies down, on the cold ground, in the middle of the day, without self-consciousness, without apology. Because this is what you do. Your body has earned the right to be horizontal for a few minutes, and the ground is there, and the sky is above you, and there is nothing that needs doing for the next quarter hour except this. The cold of the ground reaches him through his tunic, a different cold than the cold of the air, more immediate, more thorough, the cold of the earth itself pressing upward against the warmth of his body. He does not resist it. He lets it be there. Alongside the warmth, two things coexisting without conflict. He closes his eyes. The sky above him, just beyond his eyelids, is pale and moving thin cloud drifting from the west. The pale disk of the sun travelling behind it, and the light reaching him through his closed eyes as a slow, irregular variation in brightness. A slight brightening, a dimming, a brightening again. The sounds of the field reach him differently now. Lying down, with the ground against his back, he receives the sounds of the world through two pathways at once, through the air to his ears and through the earth to his body. The distant footfalls of a plough team 2 strips over arrive as a faint, regular vibration through the soil before they arrive as sound. The wind moving through the headland grass makes a close, intimate sound near his ear. Very local, very private, the sound of the world directly beside him rather than the world in general. His body sinks. There is no other word for it. The sustained effort of the morning, the accumulated holding of weight, the continuous low-grade effort of simply being upright and working, all of it releases at once into the ground. The ache in his shoulders speaks more clearly now that the work is not drowning it out, but it is a speaking that requires no response. It is just the body reporting in, noting what has been done. He lets it speak. Nothing needs doing right now, friend. Nothing needs fixing. You're warm and safe, and everything is perfectly still. Let yourself sink, just as he sinks into the ground, into the quiet, into the deep and generous rest of a body that has earned its stillness. His wife has gone. She left a few minutes ago back to the cottage, to the children, to the long afternoon of her own work. He heard her go without opening his eyes, heard the particular sound of her footsteps moving away along the headland, heard it until it dissolved into the general background of the field. Her absence is not a loss in this moment. It is simply a fact, held alongside all the other facts of the afternoon. His neighbour has risen. He can sense it, the shift in the ambient sounds nearby, the sound of a man getting up from the ground, the soft sound of hay being offered to the animals. In a few minutes, he knows, the afternoon will reassemble itself. The plough will move again. The furrows will continue. The day will turn toward its second half, which is already, somehow, a different kind of day than the first half, looser, more settled, carrying the morning's work in it like ballast. But not yet. Not for this one last minute. He lies on the headland of his field in the middle of a cold autumn Thursday in the year 1250, and the sky moves above him, and the earth holds him from below, and somewhere in the deep stillness of his resting body, something that was held releases. Some clenched thing, some wound thing, the subtle ongoing tension of sustained effort and sustained responsibility lets go. Quietly, completely, the way a fist opens when it finally has nothing left to hold. He is, for this one suspended and unrepeatable moment, entirely at rest. He rises slowly, not with the reluctance of the morning that is a different kind of rising, a rising against the body's deepest preference, against the warm dark and the straw and the sleeping household. This is gentler than that. The midday rest has done its work. The body has received what it needed, the horizontal stillness, the released weight, the brief suspension of effort, and now it is ready again. Not eagerly, not with the fresh energy of the morning, but steadily, the way a fire that has been given a little air becomes steady again, not blazing, not dramatic, just reliably, sufficiently itself. He sits up first, takes a breath, then stands that slow, deliberate unfolding, the spine finding its vertical again, the weight resettling through the hips and legs and feet. He looks at the field, at the work done, the long dark ribbons of turned soil running in parallel across his strip, the morning's labour, written plainly in the earth. Then at the work remaining, a roughly equal measure of pale, untouched stubble, waiting with the patience that untouched things always have. He calculates not with numbers, not consciously, but with the innate arithmetic of a man whose survival depends on reading correctly what needs doing against what time and energy remain. His eyes move from the turned earth to the untouched earth, to the sky, to the sun behind its cloud. He nods, slightly, to no one in particular. It is enough. The morning was enough. The afternoon will be enough. But today, this particular afternoon, there is something else. An errand that cannot wait, practical, specific, pulling him away from the strip earlier than he would otherwise leave. The blacksmith has asked him to return an iron wedge that was lent out some weeks ago and has been sitting in the corner of his byre ever since, patient as all lent things are patient, while waiting to be remembered. The reeve has asked the blacksmith to look at the mill fittings before the week is out, and the blacksmith needs the wedge for the work, and so the errand has arrived with a mild but genuine urgency. He will do 2 more hours behind the plough. Then he will unhitch the animals, return them to the byre, retrieve the wedge, and walk into the village. He does not mind this. In fact, and he would not quite articulate it this way, would perhaps not fully recognise it as the pleasure it is he looks forward to it. The village in the afternoon has a particular quality of life that the early morning village does not. The morning village is quiet and purposeful. Everyone dispersed to their work, the lanes nearly empty, the community visible only in the threads of smoke above the rooftops. The afternoon village is inhabited, populated with the slow, overlapping, continuous business of people going about their various errands in proximity to each other, and there is a pleasure in walking through that, a warmth in it that is different from the warmth of the fire or the warmth of the meal, the warmth of being known and of knowing, and of moving through a world that is entirely, specifically yours. Your warm and easy friend. Let the afternoon carry you gently, no effort needed, no destination urgent. Just breathe and let the village come alive around you. The 2 afternoon hours behind the plough pass in their own rhythm. The same motion as the morning, the handles, the furrow, the turn, the return, but with a different quality of attention. The morning's alertness has softened into something more settled. His body knows the work completely now, has known it since the third furrow of the morning, and moves through it with the ease of the deeply practiced. His mind, accordingly, is freer, not wandering, still present to the work, still making the constant small adjustments the plough requires, but not wholly occupied either. There is room in the afternoon furrows for thoughts that the morning's concentration kept at bay. He thinks about his son. The piece of wood the boy has been carving, he has been watching it take shape over the last several evenings, without asking what it is, partly from the instinct not to interrupt work in progress, partly because there is a pleasure in watching a thing reveal itself in its own time. Last night it looked like it might be a small animal of some kind. He is curious to see what it becomes. He thinks about the rent due at Michaelmas. He has the grain set aside. He has been over this calculation several times in the grey hour before rising, between furrows, in the half-awareness before sleep, and it comes out the same each time. He has enough. He is almost certain he has enough. The calculation sits in him not as a resolved thing, but as a thing that has been checked and will be checked again, because some things require repeated checking before they can be fully set down. He finishes the last furrow of his afternoon ploughing, brings the oxen to a halt, sets the plough, and straightens up into the late afternoon, which has a quality distinctly its own. The light lower now, the shadows beginning to lengthen across the field, the cold sharpening slightly as the sun descends behind its cloud. He unhitches the animals, leads them back along the headland and down the village track, returns them to the byre, forks hay, checks water. These are quick movements, practiced, efficient, a few minutes' work. Then he crosses to the corner of the byre where the iron wedge lies under a fold of old sacking. He finds it by touch more than sight in the dim interior, lifts it heavier than you expect, the dense, specific weight of worked iron, a weight that announces itself as serious, and tucks it under his arm, ducks through the low byre door, straightens into the afternoon, and the village opens before him. The lane is alive. Not loud, never loud, in this village, in this century, in any ordinary afternoon, but inhabited in a way that the morning lane was not. People moving with purpose from one place to another, their paths crossing and briefly intersecting and diverging again. The continuous low-level choreography of a community in the middle of its day. He steps into it. The first people he passes are children. 3 of them, small and quick, occupying the centre of the lane with the absolute confidence of children who have not yet learned that lanes are primarily for adults going places. They are playing some game with a stick and a smooth stone, the rules of which are entirely their own invention and which seem to involve a great deal of running. He steps around them with the automatic, unhurried adjustment of a man long accustomed to navigating around playing children, and one of them, a small girl, perhaps 4 years old, mud on her forehead, extraordinary concentration on her face, looks up at him with enormous dark eyes, regards him for exactly 1 second, determines that he is less interesting than the stone, returns to the game. He almost smiles. Children in the medieval village are everywhere, and nowhere, at the same time omnipresent as weather, as background, as the continuous ambient fact of a community that reproduces itself. They play in the lanes and at the field edges, and around the well and in the churchyard with a freedom that would alarm a modern parent, and which is, in this world, simply the normal texture of childhood. They are not supervised in any individual sense. They are watched by everyone. Every adult who passes knows whose child that is, where they live, roughly where they ought to be. The whole village is their supervisor. The whole village is, in this sense, their extended family. He passes them and moves on toward the green. The green is the breathing space at the centre of the village, a roughly triangular area where several paths converge, worn bare at its centre by decades of foot traffic, fringed with tough grass at its edges. Around it, the church, stone and squat, its tower visible above the surrounding cottages. The well, a stone-lined shaft with a wooden windlass, its rim worn smooth by 10,000 pairs of hands. The pond, shallow and silted, where the geese gather in the early morning and where the ducks conduct their own inscrutable business in the afternoons. And off to one side, set slightly apart from the other buildings by the practical necessity of the heat and noise that comes from within it, the forge. He can hear it before he reaches it. The sound of the blacksmith's work is one of the defining sounds of this world, a rhythmic, irregular, physical sound that you feel as much as hear. The clang of hammer on iron, each blow landing with a weight that sends small vibrations through the ground. The roar of the bellows, a great organic surge of air, and then the answering bloom of heat from the furnace, visible from the lane as a deep orange light pulsing in the forge's open front. He stops in the doorway. The interior is everything the exterior promises, low and hot and orange lit, smelling of iron and coal smoke and the sharp, mineral bite of hot metal meeting cold water. The blacksmith himself is a large man, broad across the chest in a way that seems almost architectural, with forearms that belong on a much larger species, and a face reddened permanently by years of standing close to heat. He is working a piece of iron on the anvil, hammer rising and falling in that particular rhythm, not hurried, not slow, exactly right. The rhythm of a man whose work has so thoroughly entered his body that efficiency and grace have become the same thing. He does not look up. Our villager waits in the doorway, easily, without impatience. He understands working at a stage that cannot be interrupted. He lives in a world where this kind of understanding is simply part of the texture of social life. Everyone knows what kinds of work require unbroken attention, and everyone extends the courtesy of that knowledge without being asked. The blacksmith plunges the iron into the water barrel. The hiss fills the forge. Steam rises, thick and sudden. He looks up. The wedge changes hands. There is a brief exchange about the mill. The blacksmith explains what he found, what he intends to do, using the technical vocabulary of his craft with the quiet authority of a man who knows his subject completely. Our villager follows most of it. He trusts the blacksmith entirely, not blindly, not by default, but because he has watched this man work for years and knows the quality of it in the way you know quality, when you have seen enough of its opposite to recognize the real thing. They talk for a few minutes about other things. A neighbour who has been unwell, something respiratory. Not serious, it seems. The road to the market town, which the recent rains have made difficult. A brief dry exchange about a long-running dispute between two households on the far side of the village, a dispute over a boundary marker that has been generating low-level entertainment for the community for the better part of a year. Then the blacksmith turns back to his furnace, the iron is ready again, and the conversation is over, and our villager steps back out into the afternoon. He does not go directly home. There is light still in the sky an hour, perhaps more, and the children are with his wife's mother, 2 cottages along, and his own wife is in the kitchen garden. He suspects, because the garden gate is standing open as he passes, and from behind the woven fence he can hear the quiet sounds of someone working among plants. He pauses at the gate for just a moment, not entering, not wanting to interrupt, and listens to those sounds, the soft, rhythmic cutting of something, the particular quality of the silence between cuts, which is not silence at all but the ambient sound of a working garden. He moves on. Along the lane beside the churchyard wall, he runs his hand along the top of it as he walks, an old habit, not meaningful in any conscious way, just the hand finding what is there to be found. The stone is rough and cold and faintly damp, with soft green moss packed into the crevices, and he feels all of this without noting any of it, the way you feel the things you have felt 10,000 times. What moves me about this image, a man walking along a churchyard wall, his hand trailing along the stone, is the depth of familiarity it represents. He has touched this wall hundreds of times. The people before him touched this wall, this exact stone, under this exact hand, on an afternoon exactly like this one. He is one in a long continuous line of people who have walked this lane and touched this wall, and he carries all of them with him without knowing it. All the hands before his, all the afternoons like this one, all the way back to whenever this wall was first built and the first hand first touched it. He belongs here, not as a choice, not as a decision he made after weighing alternatives, just as a fact, the deepest, most structural fact of his existence. He belongs to this place the way the church tower belongs to this place, not remarkably, not heroically, Essentially, the light is going gold. That brief, extraordinary autumn gold, the low sun finding a gap in the cloud for the first time all day, flooding everything with a warmth the air cannot match, painting the thatch and the whitewashed walls and the turning oak leaves at the field's edge in a colour that is almost too much, too generous, too beautiful for an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary lane. He does not stop to admire it. He walks through it, the way he walks through everything present to it without making an occasion of it, receiving it the way you receive the air, with his whole body, without comment. The gold light accompanies him down the lane, lies across the shoulders of the cottages like a warm hand, reaches into the gaps between the buildings and finds the spaces between them, every alley and corner lit briefly and completely, the whole village holding the gold light for this one short interval before the sun moves lower, and it is gone. He turns toward home. The lane is quiet around him. The village is drawing itself inward as the afternoon moves toward evening, the way a creature draws itself inward before settling, the sounds diminishing, the movements slowing, the whole small world beginning to gather itself for the last chapter of the day. He walks through the gold light toward his door. He hears it before he reaches the gate. One stroke, deep and resonant and unhurried, rolling out from the square stone tower above the village rooftops the way a stone rolls out ripples when it drops into still water in every direction at once, reaching every corner of the village simultaneously, passing through walls and thatch and the cold autumn air with equal ease. He feels it in his chest before he fully registers it in his ears. That particular quality of a large bell, well hung, the sound arrives as a physical thing, a pressure, a presence, before it becomes something the mind can name. Then the second stroke, slow, measured. The bell does not hurry. It never hurries. It has been marking time in this place for longer than any living person can remember, longer than the oldest stories that circulate in the village, and it carries in its tone the particular authority of something that has always been here and expects to always be here, a calm, absolute, unsentimental authority that asks nothing of you and simply is. This is none. The 9th hour of the canonical day, that ancient structure of bells which divides the medieval day into its sacred intervals, prime at dawn, terce in the mid-morning, sext at midday, none in the afternoon, vespers at evening, compline before sleep. The bells are the skeleton of the day, the structure on which everything else is hung. Without them, the day is just a formless stretch of light and dark. With them, it has shape. It has meaning embedded in its very hours. He stops walking when he hears it, not because a rule requires it, not because anyone is watching, just because stopping, when the bell rings, is what you do, has always been what you do, has been what you do for so long that it has moved past habit into something more fundamental. His feet simply stop, the way breathing simply stops for a moment when something unexpected and important happens. His chin lifts slightly. His eyes, which were tracking the lane ahead of him, go still. His lips move, barely, below any threshold of audibility. A few words, the same words, or the same shape of words, that he has said at this hour every day of his life. Not performed, not calculated, just said, the way you say the things that have been said so many times they no longer require the conscious mind to produce them. They come from somewhere deeper than decision, somewhere older. Then the bell finishes. The last stroke fades slowly, the resonance thinning but never quite vanishing, becoming instead a quality of the air itself, a kind of hum below hearing. And he walks on. I want to be careful here, careful not to project onto him a relationship with faith that belongs to our era rather than his. The faith of a 13th century English peasant is not the faith of a modern believer navigating the particular landscape of doubt and conviction that our time produces. It is not a faith that has been chosen from among alternatives, or defended against skepticism, or arrived at after a personal spiritual journey. It is simply the medium in which he lives, the water he swims in, as unremarkable and as total as the air. God, for him, is not a proposition. God is a fact, part of the structure of the world, as present and unargued about as the weather, as the soil, as the bell that marks the hours of the day. The church is not a place he goes to access something separate from ordinary life. It is the place that holds ordinary life inside a larger frame and reminds it of its own depth. The bell is not an interruption. It is the ordinary itself, briefly audible at its own roots. What strikes me about this, thinking about it from the outside, is how much it must have organized the inner life, to have the day marked for you in sound, to live inside a structure of hours that is also a structure of meaning, to know, at every bell, not just what time it is, but where you are in the larger story of the day, where you stand in relation to the sacred intervals that have held human time since before your grandfather's grandfather. I find this quietly, unexpectedly beautiful. You're safe here, friend. Completely held. Let the bell's last resonance fade gently in the air around you, and follow him through the gate. He turns off the lane. Through the low wooden gate of the churchyard, a gate he has passed through more times than he could count, whose latch he lifts without looking, whose creak is so familiar it is part of the sensation of entering rather than a sound he registers separately. The churchyard receives him as it always receives him, without fanfare, without acknowledgement, continuing to be exactly what it is. It is not a manicured space, not the neatly tended churchyard of a later century, with its clipped grass and orderly rows. The grass here is long in places, rough at the edges, and the grave markers are irregular, some of them carved stone, most of them much simpler, wooden crosses or barely shaped field stones that mark a presence without announcing it. Here and there, moss and lichen work their slow way across the surfaces of the older markers, the green and pale grey of them soft in the afternoon light. The boundary wall is low and uneven, and chickens have found their way in again through a gap near the north corner, picking their way among the graves with the magnificent indifference of birds. He does not find this incongruous. The combination of sacred and barnyard is entirely unremarkable to him. The line between the holy and the everyday is not a firm line in his world, not a boundary to be defended and maintained. It is permeable in both directions. The sacred is not diminished by the chickens. The chickens are not elevated by the sacred. They simply coexist, the way things coexist in a world where the practical and the spiritual have not yet been sorted into separate categories. He crosses to the church door. The door is heavy oak, banded with iron, dark with age and weather and the accumulated touch of countless hands. He puts his palm against it, flat, whole-handed, the way you greet something large and old, and pushes, and it swings inward with a sound that is entirely itself, wood and iron and years, a sound that has been this sound for as long as anyone alive can remember. He steps inside. The interior settles around him immediately, cool, several degrees cooler than outside, the stone walls holding the cold the way they hold the silence, impartially, completely, without effort. Dim the light coming from a single candle near the altar, and from the small high windows set into the nave walls, narrow slits of grey afternoon light that reach the floor in thin, pale bars. And quiet, in the way that stone rooms are quiet, not the absence of sound, but the presence of a particular quality of silence, deep and mineral and very old, as though the silence itself is something the stone has been cultivating for centuries. He lets the door close behind him, stands just inside it for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. The nave is small, 20 feet wide, perhaps 40 long, with a low rounded chancel arch at the far end, and a modest wooden rood screen dividing the nave from the chancel. The walls are plastered and painted, fragments of colour that tell their stories in pictures for people who cannot read words. Above the chancel arch, the Last Judgment figures rising and falling, rendered with the confident certainty of an age that regards this not as theology, but as straightforward description of what will happen. On the north wall, Christ in the tomb. On the south wall, nearest to where he stands, St. Christopher. He looks at St. Christopher first. Always St. Christopher first. This is not a rule he has been taught, but a habit so old it has become reflex. The glance at the figure of the great saint wading through his river, with the Christ child on his shoulder, the saint whose image, seen first in the morning, was believed to protect you from sudden death that day. He did not see him this morning, entering through a different door. He sees him now, a brief, acknowledging look, the way you look at a familiar face in a familiar place. Then he moves to his usual spot near the south wall and stands quietly. The smell of the church is its own world. Stone, first cold and ancient and faintly mineral, the smell of limestone that has been here for a century or more, that has absorbed 100 years of winters and summers and the breath of the congregation. Then candle wax, warm and sweet and slightly smoky, the single candle near the altar adding its small contribution to the air. And beneath those things, persistent and faint and unmistakable incense. Not burning now, not today, but present the way things are present when they have been performed in the same space often enough, worked into the plaster, absorbed by the stone, carried in the very texture of the air. The ghost of every Sunday's burning, accumulated over decades into something that is almost a taste as much as a smell. He breathes it in. The combination has an effect on him that he could not describe, and does not try to describe a settling, a slowing, the particular sensation of arriving somewhere that has been waiting for you, that is prepared for you, that holds a space shaped exactly to the need you bring. He did not know, walking here, that this was what he needed, but the body knows before the mind does, and his body has brought him here as it brings him here regularly, because this is where certain things can be set down that cannot be set down anywhere else. He stands in the cool silence. He is not praying. Exactly not in any formal verbal sense. There is no liturgy happening, no priest present, no service in progress. He is simply a man standing in a stone room, breathing. But the stone room is not a neutral room. It is saturated, as all old sacred spaces are saturated, with the prayers and the silences and the grief and the gratitude of everyone who has ever stood here, generation after generation, bringing their particular human weight, their fear and their hope and their ordinary need for somewhere to put the things that do not fit anywhere else, and leaving it here, in the walls, in the air, in the quality of the silence. He stands in all of that, and he is part of it now. His standing here this afternoon, his breathing in this cool and incense-touched air, becomes part of it too, invisible, unrecorded, absorbed as everything is absorbed. What stays with me, thinking about the medieval parish church, is this. Everyone came here. The lord of the manor and the poorest villain stood in this same nave. The same bell rang over all their rooftops without distinction. The same Latin words were spoken over their births and their marriages and their deaths. This building held all of them with equal, impersonal, complete impartiality in the same cool air, under the same painted ceiling, before the same altar. There is something in that worth sitting with quietly. The one place where the hierarchies of the world outside were placed, regularly and without ceremony, inside a larger perspective, not erased, not resolved, just held in something bigger than themselves. He stands for perhaps 5 minutes, no more. He is not a man of elaborate or extended personal piety. Most of the peasant farmers are not, the historians tell us. The more demonstrative expressions of medieval faith belong largely to those with the time and the literacy for them. His faith is shorter than that, more regular, more physical. The bell, the glance at the saint, the 5 quiet minutes in the cool nave, the Sunday Mass, where he stands and listens to Latin he cannot understand, but which has been said over him and around him so many times that certain phrases carry a meaning for him that is not comprehension, but something deeper, the meaning of the utterly familiar, the way a beloved melody means something before you know what any of the words say. His faith is a faith of showing up, of the body performing, week after week and day after day, the small physical rituals of orientation, turning toward the church when the bell rings, entering when the door is there to be entered, standing in the cool and the silence and the incense memory and letting it do whatever it does. I find this, if I'm honest, quietly admirable. It asks less of the emotions than the kinds of faith we tend to celebrate in our stories, and it demands more of the will, the steady, unflashy, unsexy will, that shows up not because it feels moved to, but because showing up is simply what it does. He turns toward the door, passes St. Christopher again another glance, this one with the slight private quality of a small accounting. The afternoons travel through the village, the wedge delivered, the conversations had, the lane walked, the wall touched, the gold light received, all of it in this brief wordless exchange with the painted figure on the wall noted, filed, handed over to something larger than himself for keeping. Then the heavy door opens outward, and the afternoon comes in. The cold air hits him with a completeness that always surprises. After the still interior of the church, the movement of it, the smell of it, the full sensory presence of a world that is alive and various and in motion. He stands in the doorway for a moment, adjusting, feeling the transition between the stone world and the air world, between the stillness inside and the gentle ongoing movement of outside. The gold light is lower now. The brief extraordinary gold of late afternoon has deepened slightly, moving from gold towards something more orange, the sun descending toward the tree line, the shadows on the lane grown longer and softer. He stands in the doorway of the church and the whole village is before him in this light, the thatched rooftops warm with it, the whitewashed walls glowing, the lane between the cottages a river of soft orange shadow. He takes a breath. Something has been set down. He could not tell you what, exactly. He would not try. He simply knows that the space behind his eyes, which carried a certain small persistent weight when he walked in, is cleaner now, lighter, as though the cool and the silence and the 5 minutes of simple standing have performed some small interior housekeeping, cleared a little room, opened a little air. He steps through the gate and back onto the lane. His step is lighter than when he entered. Not dramatically lighter, not transformed, just lighter. The ordinary, unremarkable, reliable lightness that this particular stone room has been providing to the people of this village for 100 years, one quiet afternoon at a time. He walks toward home. The gold light walks with him, long and warm and generous, all the way down the lane. The garden gate is open. He sees it from halfway down the lane, that particular angle of an unlatched gate standing ajar, the way it always stands when she is working inside. A small, practical signal that requires no words. She is here. The garden has her attention. He has seen this gate standing this way on more afternoons than he can count, and each time it means the same thing, carries the same quiet information. The household is being tended. The work continues. Everything is as it should be. He pushes the gate fully open and steps through. The garden receives him without acknowledgement, the way gardens always receive people, continuing to be exactly what they are regardless of who enters, indifferent and welcoming at the same time, the plants doing their slow plant work with complete and beautiful unconcern for the human world moving around them. It is a small space, perhaps 30 feet by 20, enclosed on 3 sides by a low-woven fence of hazel branches, densely interwoven, tight enough to keep the chickens out on most days and the pig out on all of them. On the 4th side, the back wall of the cottage itself, and this wall is the garden's greatest asset, radiating a faint stored warmth from the fire inside, turning the narrow strip of ground along its base into the most sheltered and productive soil in the entire plot. The earliest spring plants push up along that wall a week ahead of everything else. The last autumn plants linger there longest. The cottage gives back to the garden a little of what the garden gives to the cottage. Warmth exchanged for food, shelter repaid with sustenance. She is at the far end, kneeling. He stops just inside the gate and watches her for a moment. She has not heard him, or if she has not looked up, because the work she is doing requires her eyes and her hands, and she will acknowledge him when she is ready and not before. She is harvesting leeks, pulling them from the earth with the specific motion of someone who has done this hundreds of times, a slight rocking back and forth to loosen the roots, feeling for the moment when the soil releases its hold, and then the steady upward pull, and each leek coming free with a soft tearing sound, and a small shower of dark soil from the white root end. She gathers them, lays them in a neat row on the ground beside her, rocks the next one, pulls. Her hands are bare, dark with earth up to the wrists, the fine soil of the garden bed worked into every crease of her knuckles, every line of her palms. She works without gloves because this work requires the direct sensitivity of ungloved fingers to feel the soil's resistance. to judge the moment of release, to handle the plants with exactly the right amount of pressure. Her hands know this garden the way his hands know the plough, through years of daily contact, through the accumulated intelligence of touch. She is talking quietly as she works. He can hear it from here, not the words, just the quality of it. A low, continuous murmur, addressed perhaps to the leeks, perhaps to no one, perhaps to herself. The comfortable sound of a person working alone who is not unhappy with their solitude but is not quite silent either. He has heard this sound often, through the back wall of the cottage on summer mornings, that low, companionable self-murmuring, and it has always given him the same thing, a feeling he has no word for, something adjacent to tenderness, something adjacent to the specific comfort of a world that is proceeding as it should. She looks up and sees him. A brief expression crosses her face, quick, warm, not quite a smile and yet entirely welcoming, the flicker of acknowledgement between people who know each other well enough that a full smile is sometimes more than the moment requires. Then she looks back at the leek she is rocking loose. He leans against the fence post and watches. This image, the two of them in the garden, in the low, late afternoon light, with nothing particular being said, moves me more than almost anything else in this day. The ease of it. Two people who have been alongside each other long enough that presence itself has become the primary communication. Not silence as absence, but silence as sufficiency. The simple, profound fact of being in the same space, doing the adjacent work of a shared life, without needing to fill that space with anything other than itself. You're safe here, dear friend. Warm and easy. Nothing needs saying, nothing needs doing. Just breathe and let the garden settle around you, soft and green and quietly alive. Let me tell you what is growing here. Or rather, what has grown here through the season and now stands at various stages of harvest and graceful decline. The garden in its autumn state, rich and slightly untidy, the way things look when they have done their work and are beginning to return to the earth that made them. Along the near fence, the bean plants, dry now, papery and brown, the pods rattling very slightly when the wind moves through them, the sound of them like the sound of something whispering. The beans inside have already been harvested weeks ago, shelled and dried and stored in a clay pot near the fire-dried beans that will go into the pottage through the long winter months, providing the protein that this household cannot reliably obtain from meat. The plants themselves are done now. She will cut them soon and dig them back into the soil, returning to the earth the nitrogen they spent the summer drawing from the air. The garden is a closed system, as much as possible. What it takes, it gives back. What it produces, it receives again. Nothing wasted, nothing lost that does not find its way back. In the central beds, kale and cabbage, dark green, tough-leaved, indifferent to cold in the way of vegetables that were made for exactly this season, this latitude, this damp grey English autumn. They will survive the first frost. And the second, they will go on producing edible leaves through much of the winter, slowly and steadily, the way all truly reliable things provide themselves, not abundantly, not dramatically, but consistently, when consistency is what is needed. He looks at the kale plants with a feeling he would not name as gratitude, but which is, unmistakably, gratitude. The kale will keep them fed. The kale will bridge the gap between the last of the harvest stores and the first of the spring growth. The kale is, in the most literal sense, part of what keeps the children alive. He looks at the kale with the respect due to something that keeps the children alive. Against the cottage wall, the herbs. This is her particular art, her domain within the domain, the space where her knowledge is most specific and most complete and most irreplaceable. The herb bed runs the full length of the back wall, narrow and densely planted, each plant finding its place in relation to the ones around it, the taller ones toward the back, the spreading ones along the edges, the whole arrangement arrived at not by design, but by years of adjustment and attention, by the accumulated wisdom of watching what thrives where. Rosemary still green, still fragrant, its woody stems holding their needled leaves through any weather. She pinches a small sprig now as she moves past it, brings it briefly to her nose, releases it. A habitual gesture, part checking and part greeting. The rosemary for headaches, for clearing a congested chest, for the memory, Some say, though she is interested in it primarily for the first two things, thyme, low and spreading, its small leaves pungent and warm-smelling even in the cold, for coughs, for the throat, for adding to the pottage a depth that the grain and the vegetables alone cannot achieve, sage, silver green and slightly furry, with the particular smell that sage has, strong and slightly medicinal and somehow also completely appetizing, a smell that manages to be both a remedy and a flavour simultaneously. She cuts a handful now, ties it quickly and precisely with a twist of dried grass, and hangs it from the small hook on the inside of the fence, joining the row of other bundles already drying there, rosemary darkening as it dries, mint turning from bright to deep green, something low and spreading that smells sharp and clean and medicinal. He watches the hanging bunches move in the faint afternoon air. What strikes me, watching her hands move through this herb bed, selecting, assessing, harvesting, hanging, is the depth of knowledge those hands carry. She is the pharmacy of this household, the doctor, when illness comes, not in any trained or credentialed sense, there is no such sense available to her, but in the empirical sense, the sense built from years of observation, from watching what helped and what didn't, from the knowledge passed to her by her own mother, who received it from hers, a chain of women's knowledge extending back through the generations in an unbroken thread that no library holds and no chronicle records. This knowledge kept children alive. This specific knowledge, in these specific hands, in this specific garden, is part of what has kept her children alive. The small girl sleeping peacefully on the platform, the boy carving his wood by the fire, both of them, in part, here because of what their mother knows about the plants growing along this wall. I want to say that clearly because the historical record does not say it. The court rolls do not say it. The manorial accounts do not say it. But it is true. It is among the truest things about this household. And the woman who carries this knowledge, kneeling in the cold mud of her garden in the last of the afternoon light, deserves to be seen. He moves to help her. She does not ask. He does not announce. He simply reads the state of the garden and the state of the afternoon and the state of her, the slight tiredness in the set of her shoulders that she would not mention and he would not ask about, and he picks up the basket that is sitting empty near the gate and crosses to the turnip bed. She glances at him. A small nod. He understands. The turnips are ready, their round shoulders pushing up through the soil, purple, white and solid, their leaves yellowed and ready to give way. He crouches beside the row and begins to harvest. The process is simple and satisfying in the particular way of simple, honest tasks, the fingers closing around the base of each plant, the brief resistance of the soil, and then the clean upward pull, the root coming free with a soft sound and a little shower of dark earth. He twists the leaves off, they will go to the pig, who will receive them with the enthusiasm that pigs bring to everything, and places the root in the basket. One, then another, then another. The smell of the turned turnip soil is lighter and sweeter than the field soil, more personal, somehow, more intimate. Garden soil is different from field soil. It has been worked differently, with different tools and different intentions, enriched with household waste and careful attention across many seasons. It gives differently under his fingers. It feels he notices this without quite knowing. He notices it like a conversation rather than a monologue, like something that has been tended rather than simply worked. He fills the basket slowly. The weight accumulates, the solid, satisfying weight of root vegetables, the weight of winter food, each turnip a small contribution to the household's survival through the cold months ahead. By the time the basket is full, his hands are dark with soil, and the light has moved another notch toward evening, and behind him, his wife is tying the last of the leeks into a neat bundle with practiced hands. She stands. He stands. For a moment they are both upright in the garden, in the last of the afternoon light, with the full basket between them, and the kale still green against the fence, and the herbs drying on their hooks, and the smell of the earth on both their hands. Neither of them says anything. Neither of them needs to. The light at this moment, and I want to hold this for just a breath, because it is worth holding, is doing something extraordinary to the kale leaves. The low sun, coming through a gap between two cottages to the west, is catching the undersides of the leaves at exactly the right angle and turning them gold. Not the dark green of their daytime selves, but a luminous, transparent gold, as though each leaf is lit from within, as though the plant is briefly and privately on fire. It lasts perhaps 30 seconds. Then the sun moves lower and the angle changes and the kale is simply kale again, dark and reliable and completely itself. Neither of them mentioned it. They were both inside it. That is the thing about beauty that is given freely and without announcement. It does not require an audience. It does not require comment. It simply arrives in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, in a small garden in a medieval village, and it is there, fully and completely, for 30 seconds, for whoever happens to be present. He was present. She was present. The kale was magnificent. They move together toward the cottage door. He carries the basket. She carries the leeks. The garden gate swings shut behind them on its simple wooden latch, and the garden is left to its own quiet company. The drying herbs, the remaining kale, the empty bean plants rattling softly in the evening air. Inside, the fire needs attention. It has burned lower than it should, and she crosses to it immediately, adding wood, adjusting the placement with the iron poker. Her movements quick and certain. Within minutes the fire is breathing properly again, and the pot above it, the pottage that has been simmering all day, is beginning to speak more actively, releasing a steam that fills the cottage with the smell of onion and grain, and something herbed and deeply warm. He sets the turnip basket against the far wall. She lifts 2 turnips from it, chops them roughly on the wooden board, drops them into the pot. From outside, through the door she has left slightly ajar, he can hear the children coming in the sound of small feet on the lane. The particular quality of children winding down from the outdoor afternoon, that specific combination of voices and movement that means, almost here, almost home, almost inside. Almost. The evening is assembling itself around him. The fire, the pot, the children's voices, the smell of supper beginning to fully declare itself in the warm air. All of it coming together in the particular way of evenings that have been earned by days, fully given, not arriving as a reward. Exactly, not that simple, but with a quality of rightness, of completion approaching. That is its own kind of gift. He stands in the middle of his cottage, between the fire and the door, and breathes it all in. He goes back. The children have come in from the lane, tumbling through the door with the particular energy of small people who have been outside all afternoon and are not quite ready to surrender it, and the cottage has filled with their voices and their cold-cheeked presence, and the fire is burning well and the pottage is thickening in the pot and every reason to stay is present and accounted for. And yet, he takes his heavier tunic from the peg near the door, not with drama, not with the self-conscious air of a man making a statement about his own virtue or his dedication to the work, just quietly, practically, because there is light still in the sky an hour, perhaps a little more, and the strip is not finished, and the man he is does not leave things unfinished when there is light enough to continue. This is not a decision he makes each evening. It is simply who he is, expressed through action so habitual it has long since stopped being a choice, and become instead just the shape of his character, moving through the world in the way that characters move, not deliberated, just done. His wife looks up from the pot. A glance. Brief. She knows where he is going. She always knows. She does not say anything because there is nothing to say that they both do not already know. He pulls the heavier tunic over his head, settles it across his shoulders, ducks through the door. The air outside has sharpened. This is the thing about English autumn afternoons. They are generous with their warmth through the middle of the day. That pale, diffuse warmth of the low sun behind cloud, and then somewhere in the last 2 hours before dark they withdraw it. Not gradually enough to be unnoticeable, deliberately enough that stepping outside at this hour, after the warmth of the cottage, produces a distinct and clean impression of cold, damp, and faintly sweet, carrying the smell of turned earth from the fields and wood smoke from the first of the evening fires beginning to build in the cottages around him. He breathes it in, stands for a moment in front of the door. The sky has changed since the afternoon. The thin cloud that was overhead all day has thickened slightly toward the west, and the sun just now approaching the horizon, still above the tree line but descending with the unhurried inevitability of an autumn sun that has already given everything it had, is producing a quality of light that is neither the flat diffuse brightness of the afternoon nor the full gold of an hour ago, but something in between, something quieter, more private. The light of a day that knows it is nearly done and has made its peace with that. The village around him is quieter too. The lane is nearly empty. The children who were playing near the green earlier in the afternoon are gone, called in, or simply drawn indoors by the cold, the young body's reliable instinct toward warmth asserting itself. Two women talking near the well, their voices carrying across the lane in that particular way of end-of-day conversation, the rhythm of it slightly slower than midday speech, slightly softer, the day's urgency having mostly resolved itself into the more relaxed cadences of evening. He walks toward the field. The track opens into the open land and he stops at its edge. The field at this hour is a completely different field from the field of the morning. The same ground, the same strips, the same tree line at the far end, the same wide sky, and yet not the same at all, because light is what creates what we see, and the light here, now, in the last hour of the afternoon, is doing something to this landscape that no other hour can do. The low sun is coming almost horizontally from the west, and that raking, horizontal light falling across the ridge and furrow of the ploughed strips at a shallow angle makes the texture of the turned earth extraordinary. Every ridge throws its own thin shadow into the furrow beside it, and every furrow catches the light along its opposite wall, and the whole surface of the ploughed land becomes a study in alternating dark and light that reveals the work with a clarity and detail that midday light, falling straight down, simply cannot achieve. He can read his own day in the field. The turned earth, dark, rich, settled, runs across 3/4 of his strip in long parallel ribbons, and each ribbon is a sentence, and together they are the story of the morning and the early afternoon, written in the only language that matters here. He can see where the furrows are straightest, the long mid-morning passes when the rhythm was fully established and the plough ran true. He can see the slight drift near the lower corner where the clay is heavy and the share wanted to pull left. He can see the headland turns, each one a slightly different geometry depending on how the oxen swung wide or close. He knows this field. He can read everything it is telling him. And ahead of him, the remaining quarter of the strip, still pale and untouched, the last few hours of tomorrow waiting for him in the form of unbroken ground. He can read that too. What it will require, how long it will take, what the soil will feel like under the share when the plough bites into it tomorrow morning. He moves to the plough, which he left at the headland. The oxen are not here. He returned them to the byre after the afternoon's work, and he will not bring them back out at this late hour. What he will do is different. Without the team, without the plough, he can do the work that the plough cannot, the handwork, the close work, the labour of the mattock, and the spade that breaks the large clods the plough leaves behind, that levels the headland edges, that tends the small details of the strip that the broad implement cannot reach. He picks up the mattock. It is leaning against the headland marker where he left it, a simple tool, an iron head on a wooden handle, its weight familiar in his hands from many hundreds of uses. He carries it easily, the way you carry something that fits you, the way you carry something you have carried so many times that the body has simply incorporated its weight into its own accounting of itself. He walks to the lower end of the strip, the heavy clay corner, the place he noticed this morning and thought about during the afternoon furrows, and calculated into his understanding of the work remaining. He crouches beside the edge of the last turned furrow and examines the soil with his hands, pressing his fingers into it, feeling the texture and the moisture, turning a piece of it over in his palm. Dense, wet, but workable. He stands, raises the mattock, brings it down. There is something about evening work that morning work does not have. Morning work is full of potential. Everything ahead, everything possible, the full measure of the day unspent, the body fresh, the mind clear. It leans forward. Morning work. It points toward what is coming. Evening work is different in every way. Evening work is full of completion. Everything is behind you now, the early rising, the cold of the pre-dawn, the long furrows of the morning, the midday rest, the village afternoon, the garden, all of it laid down in the past where it will stay. The body knows what it has done, the muscles know, the joints know, the specific and particular tiredness of this specific and particular day is fully present now, not as background noise but as a constant, honest companion, a weight that has been alongside him all day and is now at the forefront, walking beside him in the open. And yet evening work has something else, something morning cannot offer. It has the quality of the final thing, the last effort before the day closes. And there is a sweetness in this that is difficult to describe without sounding sentimental about it, which it isn't. It is not sentimental, it is simply real. The sweetness of almost done, of the last few strokes of effort before rest becomes not merely available but inevitable. Every blow of the mattock is one fewer blow remaining. Every clod broken is one fewer clod between him and the fire, and the supper and the straw. He is not counting. He would never count. But the body keeps its own account, and it knows. You're safe and warm, dear friend, at rest, just like the field going quiet around him. Nothing is needed of you now. Just breathe, and let the evening settle in, slow and gentle and completely kind. He works for perhaps an hour. The mattock falls and rises and falls. The heavy clods of the clay corner break apart under the iron head, the compacted soil releasing into something looser, more workable, better prepared for the plough when it returns. He moves along the headland edge, levelling the scuffed and uneven ground that the oxen's hooves leave at each turn. Small work, finishing work, the kind of work that does not transform the field but completes it, closes the gap between rough and ready, between done and properly done. His shoulders ache. Of course they ache. They have been working since before dawn, and it is now nearly dark, and the body has been very patient with him and is entitled to make its case. He lets it make its case. He does not argue with it. He simply continues, the way you continue through the last portion of any long effort, not with fresh energy, not with enthusiasm, but with the particular quality of will that does not need energy or enthusiasm, and does not depend on them. The quiet, unremarkable will of a person finishing what they started. The light is going fast now. The sun has dropped below the tree line in the west. The sky above is still bright, a pale luminous blue-grey, clear of cloud now, the first cold stars beginning to press through at the very top of it. One, and then another, and then a third, very faint, testing the dark, but the field itself is in shadow. The extraordinary low-angle light is gone. The field has returned to itself, the turned soil dark and undramatic in the dusk, the untouched soil pale and waiting, the whole spread of it settling into the quiet of the coming night. He stops, stands the mattock upright, his hands resting on the handle, looks down the length of his strip. The work is enough. He knows it the way he knows things that cannot be argued about the way. He knows the weight of the yoke, the feel of good soil, the sound of his daughter laughing. Not as a calculation, but as a fact, arrived at through the body rather than the mind. The strip is not finished. Tomorrow's furrows are still there, waiting, pale and unhurried. But what has been done today, the long morning's ploughing, the afternoon's continuation, the evening hour of handwork is enough. It is the right amount, the amount that a day of this kind and this light can hold. He is tired, not the hollow, depleted tiredness of illness or despair, not the grey tiredness of work done without meaning. He is tired in the specific, earned, complete way of a man who has given the full measure of himself to a full day of real work, and the tiredness is inseparable from the satisfaction, the two things so interwoven that he could not pull them apart even if he tried. The ache in his shoulders is also a record of what he accomplished. The heaviness in his legs is also the weight of a day well spent. There is a word for this that no language quite has. The tiredness that is also a fullness. The heaviness that is also a kind of lightness. He does not have the word for it. He has the feeling, which is better. He picks up the mattock, shoulders it, walks. The field releases him slowly. He moves along the headland track toward the village, and the field falls behind him the way all familiar places fall behind you. When you leave them at the end of a day, not abruptly, not with any ceremony, but gradually the sounds of it diminishing, the smell of it thinning, the presence of it giving way to the approaching sounds and smells of the village in the evening. Wood smoke first. Always wood smoke first. A dozen fires, perhaps more, each one adding its thread to the common atmosphere above the rooftops. The smell of it reaches him before anything else, that warm, grey-sweet smell of a community feeding itself, of the evening fires built up in a dozen hearths simultaneously, as a dozen households move towards supper. It is one of the most deeply comforting smells in this world. He has been breathing it at this hour, on his way in from the field, for 15 years. Then the sounds. The village in the evening has a different acoustic character than the village at any other time. The afternoon's activity is wound down. The morning's silence is far behind. What remains is something in between the murmur of households gathered inside, the occasional voice passing through a wall or around a door, laughter from somewhere he cannot identify, a child's single high note of complaint quickly resolved. The village is not quiet in the evening. It is intimate. The sounds are close and warm and contained. The sounds of people gathered in small spaces around small fires, the day behind them and the night ahead. He walks through it. The lane is warm with the overflow of all these hearths. Or perhaps that is only the contrast with the cold of the field making the lane feel warm by comparison. It does not matter. The warmth is real, in whatever form it takes. He moves through it toward his own door. The byre first. He leans the mattock against the outside wall and ducks into the byre, that now familiar warmth of the animals. Their large, reliable heat still filling the low space, the smell of hay and damp straw, and the deep animal presence of them. He checks the water, adds more hay, runs his hand once along the older ox's flank, a brief, wordless good night, the same hand that said good morning in the grey pre-dawn, completing the circle of the day in the same language it began. The ox shifts very slightly toward the hay. He steps back out, picks up the mattock, crosses to the cottage door. The hinges squeak. That small, familiar, iron-voiced announcement, the house marking his return, the way it always marks his return. The sound that means here, back, home. He ducks through and pulls the door shut behind him, and the cold of the outside world and the long open spaces of the field and the whole enormous outdoor day are immediately, completely, on the other side of a closed door, and the warmth takes him. The fire, rebuilt and burning well, the pot, steaming above it, the smell of the pottage deep and rich and herbed, filling every corner of the small space with the smell of a meal that has been hours in the making, and is nearly ready. The sound of his children, somewhere in the cottage, their voices, the particular music of children in their own home in the evening, relaxed and unhurried and entirely themselves. His wife looks up from the fire, a look that contains everything it needs to contain. He is home. The field is behind him, the day is behind him, the fire is in front of him, and the supper, and the children, and the long, warm, deserved evening of a man who has given everything the day asked of him, and arrived here, at this door, at this fire, with nothing left to prove and nothing left to do but receive what the evening has to offer. He hangs the mattock on its peg, sits down. The fire holds the room. That is the only way to describe what the fire does in a small cottage in the evening. It does not merely warm the room, it organizes it. Everything orients toward it. The bench is pulled close to it. The faces of the people gathered nearby are lit by it. The shadows it throws move on the walls and give the room its texture, its depth, its sense of being inhabited rather than merely occupied. Without the fire, this room is 4 walls and a floor. With it, it is a world, a complete and sufficient world, sealed against the dark and the cold, holding its people inside a circle of orange warmth that is ancient and immediate, and to eyes accustomed to the flat, reliable light of electricity almost unbearably beautiful. He sits on the bench and lets it reach him, the warmth arriving in layers, first to the surface of his skin, the cold of the field and the lane lifting away from his face and his hands as the fire's heat finds them, then deeper, working into the muscles of his forearms, his shoulders, the persistent ache in his lower back that has been with him since midday. He does not lean toward the fire. He simply sits upright, open to it, and lets the warmth do what warmth does when you stop resisting it and simply allow it. He exhales, long and slow and complete. Something in his chest releases with that breath, some last held thing, some final tension that the body maintained through all the long hours of the day, and only now, here, in this particular combination of warmth and stillness and the sounds of home around him, can finally and fully let go. He does not notice it releasing. He only notices afterward that something is different. Lighter. More open. The fire breathes. He breathes. The cottage holds them both. His daughter reaches him first. She materializes from somewhere in the room, from the corner near the sleeping platform, or simply from the middle of the space where children often simply are, and moves toward him with the absolute, unself-conscious directness that is one of the most purely beautiful things about small children. No preamble, no social navigation. She wants to be near him, and so she comes near him, pressing her face against the rough wool of his tunic, her small warm head finding the space below his arm. He puts his hand on her head, his large, rough, calloused, field-worked hand resting on her small head. The contrast of them, the size of his hand, the smallness of her head beneath it, is something he is aware of without thinking about it. The way you are aware of things that have always been true. She is very small. He is very careful. These two facts exist in perfect relation to each other, as they have since the day she was born. He does not speak. She does not speak. There is nothing to say that the hand and the head are not already saying more completely. After a moment she wriggles free. Something more interesting has caught her attention, in the way that something always catches a child's attention, the present moment always yielding to the next, and she is gone, back into the warm interior of the evening, and he watches her go with the particular expression that fathers have when watching their children move away from them. That specific mixture of release and holding on. That look. He looks at the fire instead. You are safe here, dear friend. Warm and held and completely still. The evening is gentle and long, and nothing is asked of you now. Just breathe, and let the fire's warmth find you, all the way in. His son is at the table, sitting on the bench with the piece of wood in his hands, the small knife working at it with a focused, private patience that the boy brings to anything he has decided is worth his full attention. He looks up when his father settles on the bench across from him, a quick, assessing glance, the look of a child taking the temperature of the room, and then returns to his work. Our villager watches the boy's hands, the way they hold the wood, the angle of the knife, the small, careful strokes, each one removing a sliver of material, each one bringing the thing slightly closer to whatever it is becoming. There is something in the way the boy holds a tool that is, and he has no word for this. He would not reach for one if he did completely familiar, not because the boy is imitating him, because something has passed between them without either of them choosing it. Some knowledge that lives in the hands and travels in the blood, some understanding of how to hold a thing you are working with that does not need to be taught because it was always already there. He sees himself in the boy's hands, not with pride exactly, not with possession, with something tenderer than either a recognition, the thread extending forward, the particular feeling, available only to parents, of watching your own nature move through another person who is not you, who is entirely themselves, and who carries something of you in them anyway. The knife makes its small, careful sound. The wood gives up another sliver. She ladles the pottage. The pot has been hanging above the fire since morning, since the grey pre-dawn, when she banked the coals and set the day in motion, and what it contains now bears very little resemblance to what it contained at the beginning. Time and heat have done their slow alchemy. The separate ingredients, the grain, the dried beans soaked soft, the onion dissolved into the broth, the turnips added this afternoon from the garden basket, the herbs that she dropped in near the end, the rosemary and thyme releasing themselves into the liquid, have ceased to be separate anything. They are one thing now, a single, unified, deeply flavoured thing, thick and dark and breathing its steam into the cottage air with the particular generosity of something that has been slowly becoming itself all day. The ladle is wooden, dark from years of use. She fills each bowl, shallow clay bowls, heavy and warm to hold, each one worn to a particular smoothness from years of daily use, and hands them around. Her movements are unhurried and completely certain, the movements of a woman who has done this every evening for a decade, whose hands know exactly where each bowl should go and how full is full enough, whose attention is partly on the bowls and partly on the children, and partly on the bread she will cut in a moment, and partly, always, on the fire. She is never doing one thing. This is something I have come to understand about her, watching her through this long day. She is never doing one thing. Her attention is always distributed across multiple things simultaneously. The fire and the children and the food and the state of the room and the health of the family and the tasks of tomorrow already beginning to take shape in the back of her mind. This is not the divided, fragmented, exhausting multitasking of the modern world. It is something more integrated than that. A wide, distributed, whole-body awareness that holds many things at once without being overwhelmed by any of them. It is, I think, its own form of intelligence. Unacknowledged, uncelebrated, absolutely essential. She hands him his bowl last. Their fingers touch briefly on the clay as the bowl changes hands. He takes it. The bread. She cuts it now, the fresh loaf from this morning. The good Maslin bread that has been sitting wrapped in cloth on the shelf since it cooled, waiting for exactly this moment. She cuts it into portions and passes them around, each piece substantial and slightly warm from having spent the day near the fire, the crust giving under the knife with a sound that is one of the small, perfect sounds of domestic life. The children take their pieces with both hands. He takes his. The meal is assembled. The family is gathered. The fire burns. The cottage holds them all. He eats slowly. The pottage is very hot, he blows on the first spoonful, and she glances at him briefly with the automatic, fond attention of someone who has watched this gesture 1,000 times and still registers it, and then he eats it and the heat moves through him immediately, spreading outward from his chest and his stomach in a wave of warmth that reaches places the fire cannot reach, internal places, the deep tissues of a tired body finally receiving what they have been waiting for since midday. The flavour is extraordinary, not extraordinary in the way of elaborate or expensive food, extraordinary in the way of simple food done right, which is a different, and I would argue, deeper kind of extraordinariness. The grain thick and slightly sweet, the beans soft and earthy, the onion long dissolved but still present as a sweetness in the broth, the turnips which have given themselves entirely to the pot and become part of its depth, and over everything, through everything, the herbs, the thyme and the rosemary, faint but unmistakable, a flavour that is both medicinal and appetizing, that makes the whole thing taste of the garden it came from. He eats spoonful after spoonful. He tastes each one. This is one of the gifts of genuine physical hunger, the ability to be fully, completely present to the eating. No distraction, no ambivalence, no mental commentary running alongside the meal. Just the food and the warmth and the body receiving both with absolute, uncomplicated attention. What stays with me watching him eat is the sufficiency of this, the complete and quiet sufficiency. The bowl is not overflowing. The portions are not extravagant. There is enough, and it is good, and the family is fed, and the fire is warm, and the day is done. And in the space of that enoughness, in the gap between want and provision perfectly closed, there is something that I have spent a long time trying to name and cannot, quite. Something like wholeness. Something like rest that reaches deeper than the body. The children eat quickly, as children do. They finish before anyone else, and are immediately restless, that particular end-of-day restlessness of small people whose bodies are still full of a residual electricity that the day has not quite discharged, who are tired but not yet willing to be tired, who are aware on some level that sleep is coming, and are staging a last quiet, instinctive resistance to it. His daughter presses close to her mother after supper, leaning against her side, her head finding its way under her mother's arm, with the practiced ease of a child who has been finding this particular spot of warmth and safety for her entire conscious life. His wife continues talking, her arm dropping naturally around the girl's shoulders, adjusting without interrupting herself, the way mothers adjust. His son is back at the wood, or pretending to be. The knife moves more slowly now. The eyes, when he is not aware of being watched, have a slightly unfocused quality, the eyes of someone whose body is getting ahead of their resolve, whose tiredness is beginning to speak louder than the project in the hands. He sets the wood down, picks it up, sets it down again. He is losing the battle. He always loses the battle. Our villager watches him from across the fire with the same near smile as this morning, that small, private, entirely unsentimental warmth that the specific and familiar comedy of children fighting sleep reliably produces in a parent who has enough capacity left at the end of the day to notice it. She is telling them something. He catches the edges of it, the tail end of a story, or the middle of one, something involving a fox and a clever miller's son, and a resolution that the children are leaning toward even as sleep leans toward them. Her storytelling voice is lower than her ordinary voice and slightly more musical, with a quality of controlled expressiveness, the pitch rising slightly at moments of tension, falling at moments of resolution, drawing the children forward without their knowing they are being drawn. His daughter is entirely inside it, her bread forgotten in her hand, her eyes fixed on her mother's face. His son is pretending, still, not to be listening. He is listening, and so is our villager, not to the story which he knows, or one enough like it that the details hold no surprises, but to the voice, to the particular quality of her voice in the evening, telling a story to the children by the fire. He has heard this voice in this mode for 12 years, on hundreds of evenings exactly like this one, and it has not become ordinary in the way of things that stop being noticed. It has become ordinary in the better way, the way of things that are always there, always themselves, always exactly what they are. He looks into the fire. The fire is very low now, the big pieces of oak burning down to their deep, internal glow, the visible flames small and occasional, most of the light coming from the ember heat rather than the burning surface. The light in the cottage has dimmed with it, the walls darker, the shadows deeper, the warm orange circle of the firelight pulling in toward the hearth, closer and more intimate. Sleep is coming for him. He can feel it not as a specific sensation, but as a quality of the world, a softening of the edges of things, a gentling of the room's details, the way a room looks when your eyes are not quite focusing with their full precision. He is not fighting it. He is too tired to fight it and too wise to try. He lets it come the way the evening has been coming gradually, gently, with the patient inevitability of things that always arrive in the end. His wife catches his eye over the children's heads. That look, the one that needs no words, that says, nearly. That says, they'll go soon. That says, the day was long and it was good, and we are here, and everyone is well, and that is enough. That is everything. That is more than we are required to hope for, and we have it. He nods. She returns to her story. The fox is being very clever with something. The children are almost asleep. The fire speaks quietly to itself in the hearth. The cottage holds everyone inside its warm and smoke-threaded air. Outside, the village is going dark, the sounds diminishing one by one, each household pulling itself in for the night, the lane emptying, the dogs settling, the fires burning low. The stars above the thatch are doing what stars do on clear autumn nights, arriving one at a time, finding their positions in the dark with quiet confidence. And in here, in this room, in this small and complete world, the fire, the children almost asleep, the story almost finished, and a man sitting on a bench by a dying fire at the end of a long and ordinary and entirely sufficient day, with his eyes half closed and his hands loose in his lap, and the warmth of the cottage all around him, listening to his wife's voice and feeling the sleep arrive like water rising, slow and warm and certain, and not minding at all. The children go first. This is how it always happens, and there is a rightness to it that runs deeper than habit or sequence. The children go first into sleep the way children go first into almost everything without hesitation, without the self-conscious awareness of the threshold that makes adults linger at edges. One moment they are here, present and warm and making the small sounds of themselves. The next moment, they are somewhere else entirely, somewhere unreachable and private and complete, where even love cannot follow, where even the most attentive parent's awareness dissolves at the border. His daughter goes first. She has been fighting it for the last half hour, that ancient, losing battle that children wage with sleep every evening, as though this particular evening they might actually win, as though sheer will could hold the darkness back. The eyelids grew heavy and were lifted back by determination. The head drooped and was raised again. The bread sat forgotten in her hand. And then, without ceremony, without announcement, she simply went, tipped sideways against her mother's arm, her body releasing all at once, the resistance leaving her completely, the way a fist opens when it finally has nothing left to hold. Her mother settles her gently, moves her to the sleeping platform, draws the worn wool blanket over her, that particular blanket, soft from years of washing, shapeless from years of use, conforming entirely to whatever it covers the way truly beloved things conform. She adjusts it with hands that have performed this exact gesture hundreds of times and will perform it hundreds more, and the girl does not stir. Our villager watches from the bench. His daughter's face in sleep is smoothed of everything the day put into it, the intensity, the focus, the quick succession of expressions that animated it through every waking hour. What remains is simpler and somehow both younger and older than her daytime face. The face underneath all the faces, the one that sleep reveals. He has no words for what he feels looking at it. He does not need any. His son lasts longer. He always does. There is something in the boy that resists the end of the day more firmly, some reluctance to release consciousness that will, in a few years, become the teenager's defiant late nights, but which now is simply the child's stubborn preference for being awake over being asleep. The knife has stopped moving. The wood is held in hands that are barely holding it. The eyes, when they fall closed, take longer each time to open again. Then they do not open. The wood tilts. He catches it half asleep, on instinct, and sets it down on the bench beside him with a careful deliberateness that is almost comical, the elaborate care of someone who is almost entirely asleep trying to perform a waking task. Then he lies down on the sleeping platform beside his sister, without removing his outer tunic, without pulling the blanket over himself, with the absolute efficiency of someone who has simply run out of wakefulness and is done. His mother draws the blanket over him too, stands for a moment looking at them both, then she turns back to the fire, and her face in the firelight is the face of a woman who has brought her children to sleep safely at the end of another day. And there is something in that expression private, complete, asking nothing of the world, that I find more moving than I can quite say. He and his wife sit together by the fire, not for long. The fire is very low now. She has not added wood for the last hour, letting it burn down through its stages, the large pieces of oak having given themselves fully to the heat. What remains a deep coral glow of coals rather than any active burning. The light is very dim. The room is warm with accumulated warmth, the warmth of the fire, and of 4 bodies, and of a full day of living inside these 4 walls, absorbed into every surface, held in the plaster and the timber and the earth floor. They speak quietly, a few words only. The small practical inventory of a day ending the field, the rent, the neighbour's cough that she will check on tomorrow morning, the boy's carving, which she thinks is becoming a horse, though she has not asked him, a brief exchange about the lower corner of the strip, the heavy clay, what it will need before the frost comes. Small things. The tender, unremarkable administration of a shared life conducted in low voices beside a dying fire while the children sleep. Nothing of drama, nothing of crisis or passion or the large gestures that stories tend to require. Just 2 people, at the end of a long day, taking quiet account of the world they share and finding it more or less, within reasonable limits, with the ordinary caveats that every life contains all right. More than all right. This too is love, perhaps the deepest form of it, the form that does not announce itself because it is too busy doing its actual work. Let this quiet hold you, dear friend. The fire is going low and the room is warm and the children are sleeping. There is nowhere to be and nothing to do. Just breathe and let the evening drift you toward the dark. She goes to sleep before him. She lies down beside the children, checks them first, adjusting the blanket over the girl with that automatic, half-conscious gesture, touching the boy's forehead briefly with the back of her hand, the way mothers touch sleeping children's foreheads, an assessment and a blessing simultaneously. Then she lies down on their side of the sleeping platform, facing the wall, and her breathing changes within minutes, deepens, slows, takes on the particular quality of sleep breathing that is unmistakable to anyone who knows it. He sits alone by the fire, just for a moment, this last private interval between the day and the night, between the world of others and the world of sleep. A man alone in a dim room beside a dying fire, with his family breathing around him in the dark. He looks into the coals. They glow without flames now, just that deep interior light, red at the centre and fading through orange to a pale grey gold at the edges, pulsing very slightly with small movements of air in the room, brightening almost imperceptibly and then settling back, brightening again. It is the slowest possible rhythm, slower than breathing, slower than thought, the rhythm of something that has done its work and is now simply being warmth without effort, light without burning, presence without demand. He watches it, not with attention exactly, with presence. His eyes resting on the coals the way eyes rest on water, not focusing, not analysing, simply receiving. And in that receptive stillness, in that quiet at the end of everything, something happens in him that cannot be named because it exists below the threshold of language. A settling, a completion, the last piece of the day finding its place. What I keep coming back to, sitting here with him in this dim and firelit quiet, is the image of the continuity. Every human being who has ever lived beside a fire has had a moment like this one. The last watch, the vigil at the end of the day, the sitting alone with the coals going from red to grey while the household sleeps around you. This is not a medieval experience. It is not a peasant's experience. It is a human experience, as old as fire itself, and he is inside it right now, and so, in a way, is everyone who has ever been inside it. Every person who has ever sat alone at the end of a long day and watched the fire go slowly out. He is part of that unbroken chain, has always been. He covers the fire. The motion is practiced and quiet, a few careful shovelfuls of ash from the edges of the hearth, piled gently over the remaining coals, banking them, not extinguishing, preserving, burying the last warmth under its grey blanket so that it will survive the night, will wait beneath the ash in its suspended state, not burning, not out, but held between one fire and the next, and be ready tomorrow morning for the breath that will bring it back. This is one of the oldest human acts there is, the banking of the fire before sleep, the careful preservation of warmth through the dark, performed every night in every household in this village, in every village in England, in every corner of the world where people live beside fire, which is everywhere, which has always been everywhere. He does it now with the same hands that did it last night, and the night before, and every night of his adult life and many nights of his childhood before that. The same gesture, the same care, the same ash placed with the same quiet attention over the same deep warmth. The fire is banked. The room is darker now, very dark, the coals covered, only the faintest trace of their warmth visible as a very slight reddening of the ash in the centre of the hearth. The cottage has settled into the dark that will hold it until morning. The shapes of things are still just barely present, the table, the bench, the pot, the sleeping platform, the peg on the wall with his outdoor things, but they are shapes only, suggestions, the furniture of a room that has let go of the day. He stands from the hearth, crosses to the sleeping platform, lies down beside his wife. The straw mattress receives him, and this is where the circle closes. The same mattress as the morning, the same packed straw, shaped to the same body, worn to the same exact contours of hip and shoulder, and the long line of his spine. The same wool blanket, which he draws over himself now with a movement that is the last deliberate movement of the day, the arm reaching, the blanket coming, the warmth gathering itself around him with a completeness that is almost indistinguishable from surrender. He exhales, long, slow, complete, the tiredness of the day accumulated through every hour, since the cold feet on the floor in the grey pre-dawn, through every furrow and every step and every tool held, and every cold breath taken in the open air, is no longer something he is carrying. It has set him down. He is not tired. Not exactly he is inside tiredness, surrounded by it, held by it with a gentleness that only the very end of a very long day can produce. The boundary between his body and the mattress softens. His weight releases into it completely. His hands, those remarkable hands, wide and calloused and capable, which have been working since before first light, lie open at his sides, empty and still at last. His wife is warm beside him. Her breathing is slow and deep and completely his. The children breathe on the platform beside them. You're safe, dear friend. Completely safe, completely held, completely warm. Nothing is needed of you now, not a single thing. Let the weight of the day settle into the ground beneath you. Let your hands rest open. Let your breathing find its own slow rhythm. The night is long and gentle and entirely yours. The sounds of the cottage change with the dark. The sounds that the day drowns out become audible now. The small private sounds of a sleeping household, each one arriving in sequence as the silence deepens. The very soft settling of the timber frame, a creak from one corner, then silence, then a creak from another, the house doing its slow, patient work of adjusting to the night's cold. The sound of the thatch above, which has its own voice in the wind, not a sound so much as a presence, a slight and continuous sibilance, the roof breathing, the faint, grounding sound of the oxen next door, a slow shift of hooves in straw, a long animal exhale, the living warmth of them pressing through the shared wall. He breathes with all of it, in and out, in and out. The thoughts come now the way thoughts come at the very edge of sleep, not formed, not insistent, not asking for anything, just arriving, drifting, dissolving, the dark soil of the turned furrow curling away from the share, his daughter's face at supper, lit orange by the fire, the way his neighbour's laugh surprised itself, the smell of the herb garden in the cold afternoon, the thin line of grey along the door's edge in the pre-dawn, this morning, a whole long day ago, when the night was ending and he lay still and breathed and held the last of the warmth a little longer. These thoughts do not require anything of him. They drift through, like leaves on a slow current, turning, moving, going wherever they go, and he does not reach for them or hold them, and they do not stay. They are simply the residue of a lived day, passing through him on their way out, becoming part of the deep, unconscious ground of a life that has been lived in full contact with the world. He lets them pass. At some point the thoughts stop arriving. There is no exact moment, there never is. At this threshold, just a gradual thinning, the thought stream becoming less and less frequent, the intervals between one thought and the next growing longer and quieter and more complete, until the intervals themselves are the primary thing, and the thoughts are only occasional visitors to the silence rather than its constant inhabitants. And then only the warmth, the weight of the blanket, the slow sound of breathing his own, his wife's, the children's, all of them settling into the particular rhythm of sleep, each slightly different, all of them together, making a sound that is not quite music and not quite silence, but something held between the two, a living chord. The banked fire's warmth pressing outward from the hearth, very faintly, into the dark room. Not heat something below heat, the memory of heat, the residual presence of a fire that is not gone but only waiting. It reaches him through the darkness as the faintest possible warmth, a suggestion, a reminder. Enough. Above the cottage, above the thatch, above the thin thread of smoke rising from the banked fire into the cold October sky, the stars. He cannot see them. There is no window here, no opening through which the night sky enters the room. But he knows they are there. He has seen them often enough on the walks between seasons, on the nights when something calls him outside to stand in the lane and look up the autumn stars, cold and clear and very bright, the plough high in the north, the first winter stars beginning to appear in the south, the whole enormous wheel of the sky turning above this valley, above this village, above this cottage, above this man. They are there now, above the thatch, above the smoke, above the sleeping village and the still fields and the banked fires and the dreaming children, broadcasting their cold ancient light into the dark with the complete and patient indifference of things that have been doing exactly this since long before there was anyone to see them, and will be doing it long after. He is here, below them, one man, one cottage, one village, one unremarkable life, lived in full, on one turning world. What stays with me, what I will carry from this day, long after the details have softened and the specific images have blurred at their edges, is not any single moment but the wholeness of it, the way it arced from darkness to darkness, from the grey pre-dawn and the cold feet on the floor to this, the deep and final dark, with everything in between completely inhabited, not perfectly, not without worry or weariness or the ordinary friction of a life lived in close proximity to other lives, but fully, with his whole self present to each hour as it came, the fire, the oxen, the furrow, the meal in the field, the village lane, the church, the garden, the last evening light, the supper, the dying fire, the straw, each thing received, each thing given back. He was entirely here, and his breathing now is the breathing of sleep, deep and slow and completely surrendered, the breathing of a body that has given everything and received in return the absolute and unconditional gift of rest. The breathing of a man who has crossed the threshold between one day and the next, between the used and the restored, between the world of effort and the world of renewal. The village sleeps around him, the fields rest in the dark, the banked fire holds its warmth, the stars move overhead as they have always moved, as they will always move, turning their slow, enormous wheel above the sleeping valley, above the thatched rooftops and the still lanes and the bare fields and the breathing households, above every life large and small, remembered and forgotten, above everything that ever was and everything that ever will be, holding it all, quietly, without distinction, without end. Let me stay here for a little while longer, in this room, beside this dying fire, with this sleeping family and this quiet village and this dark that is the oldest dark there is, the dark of a world that has finished its day and given itself over, completely and without reservation, to the night. I am not ready to leave yet, and I suspect, if you are still here, if these words are still reaching you however softly, however close to the edge of sleep, that you are not quite ready to leave either, that something in this world we have been inhabiting together tonight has found a place in you and settled there, and you are not yet certain what it is or what to do with it, and you do not need to be certain. You can simply hold it, loosely, the way you hold something warm in cupped hands, without gripping, without examining, just holding. We spent this day with a man who will never know we were here. He went about his life, rose in the grey pre-dawn, rebuilt his fire, tended his animals, walked behind his plough through the long cold morning, rested at midday in the headland grass, returned the iron wedge to the blacksmith, stopped in the cool silence of the church, helped in the garden, worked the evening field, came home, ate supper with his family, watched the fire go low, covered the coals, and lay down on his straw mattress, and closed his eyes, and in none of it, in not a single moment of it, did he imagine that 800 years later someone would be listening. That is one of the quiet miracles available to us, I think. That ordinary days, lived in complete privacy and complete unself-consciousness, without any awareness of being observed or remembered, can still reach across the centuries and speak. Not the grand days, not the days of battle or coronation or plague or miracle, the days that made it into the chronicles, the ordinary ones, the days of bread and soil and firelight and children falling asleep. Those days, approached with enough patience and enough care, can still be present to us, can still, if we are willing to be still enough to receive them, land in the chest with the weight of something real. He was a real person, a complete, specific, entirely unrepeatable person, with his own particular hands and his own particular aches and his own private knowledge of his own particular strip of earth. And tonight, for a little while, he was with us. I find this, honestly, quietly sacred. The thing that returns to me most insistently, thinking about his day from the far end of it, is the quality of his presence, not his virtue, not his wisdom or his piety or his endurance, though he had all of those in ordinary measure, just his presence, the way he was in each hour of his day, not completely, not without distraction or worry or the ordinary wandering of the mind, but substantially, bodily, with his feet in the actual ground and his hands on the actual handles and his nose in the actual cold air, in a way that is difficult for us to fully replicate and, I think, important to understand. He could not be somewhere else. That is the beginning of the explanation, though it is not the whole of it. He had no mechanism for being somewhere else, no screen to slip into, no infinite scroll of other people's lives to move through, no constant low-level pull of a world happening elsewhere that he was always slightly missing. His life was here, and only here, completely and with no remainder. And so he was here, and only here, in the same complete way. We tend to romanticize this. I want to be careful not to. His world did not offer this presence as a gift. It imposed it as a condition. And the condition came with real costs, with cold and uncertainty, and the particular anxiety of lives that rested on things he could not control. I do not want to trade my life for his. I would not, and you would not, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But I want the quality of attention that is life enforced. I want the ability to be in the thing I am in fully, bodily, with my whole self available to the specific moment, rather than distributed across the 1,000 other moments that modern life keeps offering as alternatives. And I wonder, often, whether that quality of attention is available to us as a choice in a way that it was not available to him as a choice because he had no choice, and perhaps that is part of what made it possible. But perhaps we can choose our way towards something like it. Perhaps the voluntary can approximate the enforced, if we are serious enough about it. Perhaps that is, in part, what evenings like this one are for. He belonged somewhere. This is the second thing that stays with me, and it is perhaps the thing I find most difficult to think about without a kind of grief that I did not entirely expect. He belonged to a specific valley, a specific village, a specific community of faces and voices and shared histories. Every stone of that place knew him. Every path, every field boundary, every creak of every gate. He was part of the fabric of it in a way that required no effort and no maintenance, because it was simply the condition of his existence. He had always been there, and the place had always held him, and the two things were not separate. We have largely lost this. Not entirely. There are still places where something like it persists, and those places tend to be the ones that people describe with a particular warmth, a particular density of feeling that is different from merely liking a place. But the general direction of modern life, its mobility, its chosen communities, its constant reshuffling of contexts and connections, has moved us steadily away from the kind of belonging that does not need to be built because it has simply always been there. And I think we have not always known what we were trading. The belonging that is given rather than chosen, the belonging of the known face in the familiar lane, of the neighbour whose laugh you know from 3 fields away, of the bell that marks your hours and the well where your grandfather drew water. This kind of belonging has a depth and a specificity that chosen community, however warm and genuine, rarely quite replicates. It is seasoned differently. It carries a different weight. It provides a different kind of anchor. He had it completely, without ever thinking about it. And I sit with this not to despair about what we have lost, but to understand it more precisely, so that we can build toward it in the ways that our different world permits, so that we can choose, more deliberately and more seriously, to stay, to know our places, to let ourselves be known. I want to speak about the labour, because I think we misread it when we look at it from the outside. We see the long hours, the physical difficulty, the absence of machinery, the dependence on weather, and the will of the Lord. We see the hardship, which was real, and we do not always see what was also real, the felt sense of competence, of sufficiency, of being adequate to your own life. He knew how to do everything his life required, Not everything in the abstract, not the everything of a modern professional who is competent at a specialized thing and depends on systems he cannot understand for everything else. The specific, practical, daily everything of keeping a household alive and a farm functioning through the cycles of the seasons. He knew the soil and the animals and the fire and the tools. His wife knew the garden and the herbs and the household economy. Between them, they possessed a complete expertise in the business of their own lives. There is a dignity in this that I find remarkable and increasingly rare. We have traded that competence for convenience, which is a trade that makes sense, which I am not arguing against. The specialization and exchange of modern economic life has produced abundance that he could not have imagined. I am not suggesting we return to anything, but I am noting what went with the trade, the felt sense of being adequate to your own life, the knowledge in the hands and the body and the specific learned intelligence of a person who has been paying close attention for a long time, that you can do what your life requires, that you are not dependent at every level and in every direction on systems so large and complex that your own participation in them is invisible even to yourself. The plough handles in his hands were, among many other things, the feeling of that sufficiency. The knowledge in her hands as she moved through the herb bed was the same thing in a different form. Both of them carried it this deep, unremarkable, absolutely real sense of being enough for their own lives. I think the absence of that sense, the modern condition of fundamental dependence on things we do not understand, produces a particular anxiety that lives below consciousness, that has no specific object and therefore no specific solution, that we carry with us through our abundantly comfortable lives without quite knowing where it comes from. He did not carry that anxiety. He had other ones, real ones, ones with specific and serious objects, but not that one. The fire is almost out. I am watching it from outside of time now, outside the century and outside myself, and I am watching the last light of the coals fade from their deep red toward a quiet, settling grey, and I am thinking about what it means to have spent an evening in this man's company, what we carry with us now, back across the centuries and into our own beds and our own darkness. I think we carry this, the understanding that ordinary life, when it is fully inhabited, is not ordinary at all. It is extraordinary. Not in the way that dramatic events are extraordinary, not with noise or spectacle, or the particular energy of things that announce their own importance, but in the quieter, deeper way of things whose value is invisible precisely because it is total. The fire rebuilt in the morning dark, the long furrow opened in the cold field, the meal eaten with full attention after honest work, the child's head beneath the large, careful hand, the wife's voice telling a story by a dying fire, the stars above the thatch turning their slow wheel whether anyone is watching or not. All of it extraordinary, all of it available, in some form, to us. He was not a remarkable man. That is the whole point. He was as unremarkable as it is possible to be unnamed, unrecorded, unknown to history in any conventional sense. And his day was unremarkable in exactly the same way. Nothing happened. Nothing that a chronicler would pause over. Nothing that would make any record. And yet his day held, from one end to the other, everything that a human life holds when it is lived in full contact with the world. Cold and warmth, labour and rest, solitude and community, the practical and the sacred, worry and release, the long effort of the morning and the surrender of the evening and the long deep dark in between. He was here, completely here, and now, perhaps, so are you. So let me say this gently before we close. If you have followed him through this long day, through the grey pre-dawn and the cold field and the midday rest and the village afternoon and the garden and the church and the evening work and the supper and the dying fire, then you have done something real tonight, something that matters in a way that is difficult to articulate but easy to feel. You allowed another life to be present to you, a life remote from yours in almost every external detail, a life separated from yours by 800 years and every transformation that 800 years contains, and yet you let it come close. You let his cold be your cold, and his warmth be your warmth, and his tiredness be your tiredness, and his fire be the fire you are lying beside right now, in whatever form your fire takes. And in doing that you close something, some distance between then and now, between him and you, between the forgotten and the remembered, between the long human past and this particular present breathing moment. He lived his day in full. He gave it everything. And now you are lying down too, in the dark, with the warmth around you and the night outside and everything that needed doing today either done or given over to tomorrow, which will come in its own time, as mornings always come without announcement, without fanfare, with the same patient grey light pressing against the same dark, and the same fire waiting in the same ash, for the same breath to bring it back. Rest now. Let the day go. Every bit of it. Set it all down, right here, in the dark, and let the night receive it. You are warm, you are safe. The world outside is very quiet, and the dark is gentle, and you have been here, fully here, for this whole long and beautiful evening. That is enough. That is everything. We are nearly at the end, dear friend, and I want you to know before the last words come and the silence takes over completely, that I am genuinely grateful you are here tonight. Not in a formal way, not in the way you say things because they are the right things to say, in the real way. The way you are grateful for company that made the evening feel like something worth having, because that is what you gave this, by being here. You made it worth having. We spent a long time today with someone who never asked to be remembered. He did not compose himself for posterity. He did not choose his words carefully in the knowledge that someone might be listening. He simply lived, rose, and worked, and rested, and ate, and loved his children, and banked his fire, and closed his eyes, and the living was the whole of it, sufficient unto itself, requiring nothing beyond its own completion. And yet, here we are, 800 years later, in our warm rooms and our comfortable beds, with all the extraordinary distance of the modern world between us and that small thatched cottage in the English Midlands, and somehow, tonight, that distance closed. Somehow the cold of his morning became our cold, the weight of his tiredness became our tiredness, the warmth of his fire became the warmth we are lying inside right now. I find this extraordinary every time, the way the ordinary reaches across time without effort. The way a man ploughing a field in 1250 can still, in some essential and irreducible way, be known. Not fully, we would be dishonest to claim fully, but enough that something real passed between his world and ours tonight, enough that the distance is a little smaller than it was when we began. That seems to me worth doing slowly, worth doing carefully, worth doing again and again, with different lives and different centuries and different ordinary days that no one thought to write down, which is, of course, exactly what we will do, because there are so many more days to spend together, so many more lives to follow through their quiet, unremarkable, completely extraordinary hours, so many more worlds to step into, not to study, not to analyze, not to position ourselves as knowing observers looking down at the past from the comfortable elevation of the present, but to inhabit, briefly, gently, with respect, the way we inhabited this one. I think about where we might go next. I think about a Roman baker in the city of Pompeii, not in the moment of the catastrophe, nothing like that, but on an ordinary morning, a generation before, when the mountain is just a mountain and the city is alive with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of cartwheels on stone streets, and the particular golden light of an Italian dawn coming in over the rooftops. I think about following him from the cold dark of the bakery in the early hours, when the ovens are being stoked and the dough is being shaped by hands that have shaped it 1,000 times, all the way through to the morning rush of customers, and the quiet afternoon, and the bread that is left over at the day's end, given to whoever needs it. Or I think about a Japanese farmer in the highlands of Honshu, perhaps 300 years ago, a woman, this time tending her terraced rice paddies in the last weeks before the autumn harvest, walking the narrow earthen walls between the flooded fields in the early morning, while the mist is still on the water, and the mountains above are only shapes, dark and enormous against the pale sky. I think about the sound of the water moving between the paddies, the smell of the rice at this stage of its growth, the particular quality of that mountain light. Or I think about medieval Persia, a scribe in a library in Isfahan, perhaps in the 11th century, sitting in a room that smells of paper and rose water, and the particular dusty sweetness of old books, with a reed pen and a pot of ink and a manuscript he has been copying for 3 months, the letters forming under his hand with a precision and a care that is itself a form of devotion. I think about the sound the pen makes on the paper, the stillness of the room around him, the way the light comes through the latticed window and falls across the page in a shifting, intricate pattern. So many lives, so many days, so many ordinary, extraordinary human moments waiting quietly in the past, waiting for exactly this, a slow voice in the dark, and someone willing to listen, and an evening long enough to hold them. We have all the time in the world, but not tonight. Tonight has given us everything it had to give, and it gave generously, didn't it? One full medieval day, lived from the first grey edge of dawn to the last ember of the evening fire. One man, one village, one complete and unrepeatable life, held up to the light long enough to see what it was made of. And what it was made of, in the end, was not so different from what we are made of. Cold feet on a cold floor, the reluctance to leave warmth, the satisfaction of a fire rebuilt, the ache of a long day's labour, and the sweetness that lives inside that ache, the sound of a familiar voice in the next room, the way a sleeping child's face can stop your heart, the dying fire, and the dark, and the straw, and the stars. These things are ours too, have always been ours, will always be. He is gone, and his village is gone, and the specific furrows he ploughed in the autumn of 1250 have long since been turned back into the earth they came from. But the things his day was made of, those have not gone anywhere. They are still here, available, still, to anyone willing to slow down enough to receive them. That is what I hope you take with you tonight. Not information, not a lesson, just that the felt sense that the thread connecting you to the long human past is real and warm and unbroken, that you are not the first person to lie in the dark at the end of a long day and feel the tiredness and the warmth and the quiet satisfaction of another day fully given, that you are part of something very long and very deep, and that something holds you whether you think about it or not. It holds you right now. So, my dear and tired and perfectly safe friend, this is Alan from Sleepy History, saying thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for spending this evening here, for choosing slowness when the world is fast, for letting an ordinary medieval man's ordinary medieval day be something worth 2 hours of your attention and your care. That is not a small thing. That is, in its own quiet way, a form of respect for him, for history, for the long unbroken thread of ordinary human lives that led, step by step and furrow by furrow, all the way here to you. If you enjoyed tonight, please do come back. Leave a comment. Share the episode with someone who needs a slow evening. Subscribe if you haven't already. It helps more than you know. And it means that next time, when we step into another world together, you will be there from the beginning. And next time will be soon. But for now, for right now, in this moment, in this warm dark where you are lying with everything behind you and nothing yet ahead, the fire is banked. The village is sleeping. He is asleep. And you, dear friend, you who followed him all the way from the grey pre-dawn to the straw and the stars, you who were patient enough and still enough and open enough to let his world become briefly and truly yours, you can sleep now too. You have earned it. The night is long and gentle and completely yours. Good night.